Hi, everybody. Happy Thursday, November 5th. This is Charlene O'Hanlon, and I am welcoming you to another edition of TechStrong TV. We have an amazing lineup of discussions on today's program, everything ranging from security to whatever you've got, the global cities that are opening during the pandemic. Lots to talk about, lots of great discussions, including conversations that Alan has had with James Brazos of Checkmarx, and they talk about Checkmarx integration with the new GitHub code scanning security feature. It's been 5 months in the making, so lots of stuff to talk about regarding that. We also have a great interview with Mike Murray from Scope Security. Alan talks to him about healthcare security and how it's so much more challenging than regular security, a lot of times because medical devices are just locked down so tight that it's almost impossible to update them on a regular basis. So Alan and Mike have a great conversation about that and what healthcare organizations can do to ensure that their security remains up to date despite the fact that devices are so locked down. Alan's also got another conversation, this one with Phil Tees of Moogsoft, who posits that organizations can create system observability in the time it takes to make a cappuccino, he said. That is definitely going to be an interview worth checking out. I'm actually really fascinated by that description as well. So hopefully that's going to be another great conversation that they have. Also, we've got Stephen Chin gave his presentation from the recent DevOps Experience virtual event called Scaling DevOps to the Edge. Great, fascinating interview or fascinating conversation discussion that he presented at the show. Definitely one worth checking out. It really focuses on how organizations or how DevOps individuals can take their skill set and apply that to a new and challenging domain that is in need of the same human and technology best practices that help global organizations distribute software securely and continuously to self-hosted and cloud environments. Very, very interesting conversation, discussion that he does at DevOps Experience, and definitely one presentation you'll want to look at. I have a conversation also with Keith Stewart from vArmor. He and I have a really fascinating and lively discussion about the importance of understanding the relationships between data, applications, and humans to better secure organizations. It really does outline how everything is interconnected within a network and how kind of that butterfly effect can have a huge impact on organizations if they don't understand the relationship between the systems and the data and how we interact with that data on a regular basis. So definitely worth checking out. What else do we have? We have Jeff Brown, who's the CEO of OutSystems. He and I have a really, really interesting conversation also. This one is about the research that his company recently did on the cities that are actually reopening the fastest as we entered phase 2 of the COVID-19 lockdown. And some of the ones that even as they are reopening, they are maintaining a almost fully remote workforce. It's really interesting research and kind of gives some insight into basically how a lot of organizations are looking at their workforces and where they want them to be in light of the COVID-19 pandemic and beyond as they look toward the future. Over in Analyst Corner, Mitch Ashley has a great discussion as always, and then he has a conversation with Eric Kadrowski, I believe it is. He is the senior director of cloud research and CISO of Sunray Security, and they actually have a great conversation about security and governance of identities and data across multiple clouds. Now, we all know that as the pandemic has raged on, so many organizations have adopted multiple cloud technologies to enable their workforce to have access to all of the applications and services that they need to be able to work productively and proactively while they are working remotely. Unfortunately, however, that has had an impact on the security of a lot of the data that resides across multiple clouds, and issues regarding the governance of that data and even the ability to access that data has kind of put some companies in a precarious position security-wise. So Eric and Mitch have a great conversation about that, and definitely one worth checking out. And finally, we have a conversation with Casey Zerkis, who is actually a former Security Boulevard contributor, but now she's an RSAC content strategist, and she's also going to be joining Mitch Ashley and Christy Westfall, who is the CSIRT Vice President at Union Bank. They have an interesting conversation about the RSAC 365 Virtual Series seminar. It's called Reducing Cloud Risk, What You Haven't Thought of Yet. That one is happening November 17th. Casey outlines what folks can expect from that virtual summit and how you can get involved in it. All right, so let's get started with TechStrong TV, but first we have a short commercial break.
Hiring great DevOps and cyber talent is a huge challenge for technical teams. Cloud transformation is driving demand higher. You've tried doing it yourself. Job boards, LinkedIn, didn't work. Recruiters are an option, but who do you trust and not waste your time and money? RecruitOps is the new way to source engineering talent. From MediaOps, the people behind DevOps.com, Security Boulevard, Container Journal, and more. We sit right in the middle of the hottest positions in Dev, Sec, and Ops, and the brightest minds in the field. If you're looking for a great position or the talent to fill it, we can help you. Trust us, risk-free.
All right, let's get started. Our first conversation today is with James Bratsis of Checkmarx, and he and Alan have a discussion about the Checkmarx's integration with the GitHub code scanning security feature.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us on another TechStrong TV segment. For this segment, I'm joined by my friend James Bratsis from Checkmarx. Hey James, welcome to TechStrong TV. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me again.
It's a pleasure to have you on again. So James, since the last time we talked, I hear you got a new title and promotion. Why don't you share it with our audience?
Yeah, so my previous role, I was a solutions engineer, and I have now moved over to product as developer experience. That's kind of the focus I'll be on, focusing on integrations and plugins. It's actually like my dream job. It's like kind of my whole career has been kind of building up to this. I just want to give props out to my mentor, my first boss, Ross Wheeler. One of the first tasks I had straight out of college when he hired me was to actually, write some regexes and some code style guides for a Slick edit, which was kind of like a old school IDE editor. And he kind of had always put into my head, like, always make your life more efficient, learn the shortcuts on keys. I was always into the new IDEs, into new technology. And like, this is like the perfect fit for me, like, being able to be on the product side and help our product give the developers a better experience, a better integration. So it's kind of full circle. When my boss, Robert Nielsen, offered me the job and told me about the role, like I was standing up. I was like, this is amazing. I was pretty stoked about it.
Excellent, man. That sounds cool. Number one, congratulations, right? Number two, you always want to hear people say, this is my dream job and I got it, I'm doing it. I tell people this all the time. I tell my own kids this. I tell some of the younger folks we have working at MediaOps, if you do something you love doing, you never work a day in your life. That's an old saying that I used to think was bullshit, and it's not. It really makes life a lot easier when you're stoked to get up in the morning and go do what it is you do. versus sitting here watching a clock. You know,
not to say my other job was not exciting and not fun, but I was doing like these integrations just on my side time. When I kind of led the partnership with GitLab, like I was just doing that, just because I thought it was kind of cool. So now I'm doing it actually as my full-time job. It's perfect.
Good for you, man. So, we jumped right into your new job and kind of fluffed over check marks. Our audience is familiar enough with check marks, though, but just in case for people who don't know, of course, check marks is one of the leaders in code analysis testing, right? Security testing for code and apps, static, dynamic, and then IRSL? IAST. All right.
So it's a complete AST platform, application security testing. So 4 different solutions make it up. SAST, of course, which we're known for our security scanning. We have an SCA solution for software composition analysis. IAST
open source
for the kind of dynamic testing. And then we have an AppSec awareness solution as well called code bashing. You're giving all these developers all these vulnerabilities. You should train them as well. So we have a just-in-time training platform for AppSec development as well.
Fantastic. Hey, man, every dollar they're paying is good money well spent, James. You got that down. So, James, we're going to talk today, though, about a new integration around GitLab. Right, GitLab 13.5 came out, I think, the 22nd of this month, has some new capabilities, I think, actually around some security testing. But tell us what's going on with checkmarks and GitLab.
So we have a GitLab integration that has been done that pretty much is embedded into the CI/CD pipeline, getting the results back into the merge requests, into their security dashboard. But we also just came out with our GitHub Action integration. So that also is importing with GitHub's new Seraph format for vendors to import their results into their security alerting dashboard as well.
Very cool. And why should people care?
It's really we always talk about shifting left, right? So, you can shift left as much as possible. This is really putting the results into the developer's lap, right? You have the ability to filter on different types of findings, and you're putting it into their PR requests. You're putting it into their pushes, so they have access right into their source control management system without ever having to leave.
Very cool. And, it's easy for you and I to sit up here and talk about, oh, yeah, we just announced a new integration, and this is why it's good, important, or whatever. And, but for people sitting out there, give them a little idea of, James, what kind of work went into this integration? It's not just snap your fingers, blink your eyes, and shake your nose. There's work in doing these integrations. What was involved?
Well, I can just tell you from GitHub's perspective, they have been working on, there's been an open forum kind of protocol for this Seraph integration been going on for a while. I talked to Microsoft maybe about 5 years ago about this. It was their initiative to start Seraph, which is basically just a standard for stack analysis results. It's in a JSON format, but they came up with their own standard. So having vendors be able to contribute to this standard and also use this standard, I think it was a pretty big effort going on for a very long time. The GitHub Action itself has been out for a while. It's been this kind of GitHub CI process they've had. With the Action itself, we already had one for a while. We've just kind of built on top of it to have that Seraph output, so you can actually just import your results right into GitHub. So I give GitHub a lot of credit. They had it pretty solid. They opened it up to other vendors, so other vendors can put in their code quality and their security scans as well.
Absolutely. James, I have to apologize. I think I referenced GitLab instead of GitHub earlier. But it brings up a whole nother thing, though, too. Your check marks. Well, you are not check marks. You work for check marks, right? And you guys got to support developers, and especially as part of your new role, right? whether people are using GitHub or GitLab or some other tools, right, in CI/CD, right? You shouldn't care, right? Because as long as they're using check marks for their application security testing, you've got to support them. So now with this new role as being in product for app like that, app development, how hard is that, or what, how do you, I mean, you want to support them all, but there's only so many hours in a day too. So how do you kind of juggle that one?
Luckily, we have great relationships with our checkmarks users, so we can kind of figure out what they're using, what they want to use, and how they want to use it. So we've always done supporting for pretty much every CI plugin, such as Jenkins and Team City, and the whole list of different CI. But we're seeing in the field and from our users that it's actually coming into the source control management system, and that's where we're going to try to focus more of our energy on. It's all feedback from our, from the checkmarks user.
Well, no, it's GitOps is what it comes down to, right? And whether you're using GitLab or GitHub or another source, right, repository, that's where the action's taking place, at least pre-deployment, right? That's where you got to be focusing. We're at like a Goldilocks moment right now with GitOps, where because Git is such a standard, right? You're okay. It makes it easy to support multiple Git-based products, right? And as even in the CI space and some of the new CI/CD stuff, products out there, there's a lot of them. Jenkins, right? Jenkins is kind of old in the tooth already, but there's CodeFresh. There's a whole bunch. Circle CI is out there, and it's got to be. That's the beauty of APIs, right? Is hopefully you build an API that plugs in, and regardless of what your developer customers are using, you could plug it in.
I think you kind of nailed it, actually, and that's kind of the direction that I want to take the product, is that it's impossible sometimes to support every single CI. It's just not only are you going to be drowning in tech debt, but sometimes, you only have a small amount of users using it. So what we're going to do is kind of really work on our CLI integration and our API. So it's just easy for customers just to plug it in through their CI if we don't have an out-of-the-box plugin. I don't see that happening with Jenkins. I think Jenkins is embedded in a lot of organizations. It's going to be really hard to pull that out because they have custom scripts, they have custom pipelines. Everything kind of runs through Jenkins. So it's going to be a while before users move from Jenkins completely into their GitOps, but it's a trend that I'll see more new customers, at least new companies, using the built-in GitHub and GitLab type of integration.
I think there are sort of mega trends that'll affect that, right? So more Kubernetes, right? As people do more Kubernetes, it's not that they're going to rip out Jenkins or throw it away, but they may not, the greenfield stuff may not use it. It'll just be the brownfield stuff, if you will. I think we're here's another thing I've been starting to see, and I don't know if you have too, James, this idea of CI orchestration, right? So CI tools in Git or what have you, and then sort of a CI orchestrator that orchestrates all of the pieces of it, if you will, and gets that, deployed, whether it be to Kubernetes or something else.
Yeah, and GitLab is their GitLab CI tool, and then also for GitHub, it's their actions, their workflows. So it's exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, it's a change. It's a change from last year. And what's interesting is even with COVID, the remote work, all that stuff, we're seeing real advancement. That's the nice thing also about this whole open source cloud native community, right? Every month GitLab releases, GitHub is right there every time, also doing new functionality. I must have done, I do at least a month, once a month, a GitHub kind of catch up on some, a new release they've put out or a new feature they're supporting, especially with security. And so, I mean, it's a testament.
Do you find it interesting watching these two go at it? I find it fascinating.
Yeah, but I'll tell you who I think the winner is. I think the winner is the people watching this, our audience, because you know what? They are, and by the way, it's not a 2-horse race. CloudBees is out there. CodeFresh, I mentioned, is out there. Circle CI is out there. There's a whole bunch of companies. What are they called? Digital.ai, and there's a whole bunch of companies in this space now. Perforce. But when you have that kind of competition, the losers will drop quick, and the winners continue to rise. And because of that competition, they kind of force each other to get better and be better. And when they're better, we get better solutions to develop on. We get more security integrations. We have better code coming out, hopefully. We're integrating and deploying code better. So I think, it's good for the market. You don't want a market dominated by one company, because then it gets stagnant.
Yes.
Right?
I agree 100%.
So I mean, I love seeing what GitHub is up to. Right? And when the other nice thing about it is, in another parallel universe, if you had a company like GitHub, and let's face it, GitHub's Microsoft. They're not hurting for money, right, or resources. And you would say, oh my God, who's going to compete with these guys, right? Who can compete with, we better have Google or Amazon do one. But no, it's not Google or Amazon that's competing with GitHub. It's GitLab, it's CloudBees, it's, a bunch of these that I've mentioned that, because at least in our little corner of the world, quality counts, right? If you're developing good product, good services, developers appreciate that. They're not gonna, the days are gone where you just say, no one ever gets fired for buying IBM, right? People today want best of breed. They want the best solution.
Yeah, we haven't even really talked about Amazon either, because Amazon has their own CI and code repository as well, right? With the pipeline. So
yep.
Code Star too. I think they have a built-in IDE. So I mean, they're gonna make their presence known. It's just a matter of time, right?
Amazon has a different model, right? Amazon's model, James, is always they're gonna give you what they've got built in. It may not be as good as the best of breed. It's 80% of the functionality, 20% of the price, or even free. And
right.
So, but if that 80% is enough for you, run with it, right? You want true cutting edge, best of breed. Maybe you want to see what GitHub or GitLab or one of these others are doing. The innovation is amazing. Now, it keeps you on your toes too, though.
Oh yeah,
right.
I mean, I'm watching GitLab's releases they have every month. In the beginning of the month, I watch that pretty much religiously. GitHub, I'm following their public roadmap now and watching their Twitch channel. They have a Twitch channel on Fridays, which is awesome. That they just kind of do demos and stuff, and I love what they're doing. I feel like GitLab really made that presence known that you should have public roadmaps and make things out on the internet and just let anyone see it. And I think GitHub is following that as well.
Yeah, no, I think GitHub's done an amazing job. It's funny. I spoke to Sid Sibrandy, the CEO of GitLab, and he'll tell you there would be no GitLab without GitHub.
Oh yeah.
So it's all good. And look, like I said earlier, it's good for check marks, and it's good for security in general, right? To have these choices out there. So sometimes we got to count our blessings and be happy about it. Anyway, James, we're about out of time. Number one, man, hey, congratulations on the new role and title and promotion. I think you're in a good spot, and they picked the right guy for it too, though. Come back and talk to us again soon.
I appreciate it. I will anytime.
You got it, James. James Bro says check marks about new GitHub integration with check marks, and that's it. Alan Schimmel here on TechStrong TV. We'll be back with another guest in a moment.
All right, welcome back. We've got a conversation now between Alan and Mike Murray of Scope Security. They're talking about healthcare security and the challenges that organizations are facing in keeping systems secure. So let's give it a listen.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, this is Alan Schimmel. Welcome to another segment on TechStrong TV. For this segment, I get crazy when I get to hook up with my old security friends here. And this is one of my old security friends. Well, he's not old, but I'm friends with Mike Murray here for 15 years at least, maybe more, 20. Hey, Mike, man, welcome to TechStrong TV.
Man, thank you.
Us.
This is a blast. This is, like you said, this is an exciting way to spend a morning, just hooking up with you and chatting about everything. It's good to see you, dude.
Yeah, absolutely. Same here. I was so pumped when they told me you were, going to come on. So, Mike, let me kind of lay the foundation here. It was a bad couple of days for the healthcare security world this week. We both have a lot of friends in the industry. Martin Fisher comes to mind, our friend Martin. A bunch of others, though. This ransomware group, they say out of Eastern Europe, hit a bunch of healthcare providers pretty hard, and frankly couldn't come at a worse time.
Yeah.
And you got to worry about, you have to question the humanity of the kind of scum who would do this right in the middle of this pandemic. We'll get into it, but what's your take? First, let's go with that. What's your take on what's happening?
Yeah. So, man, this is the. You and I have known each other a long time. We've all talked for years about the first really bad. Was it Steenan that called it Cyber Pearl Harbor or whatever kind of those sort of worst case scenario kind of moments. And we've never really had one that's super bad. And this is actually, I hate to sound alarmist because I'm not meaning to be, but this group, and it's out of Russia, by the way. The news broke last night with the attribution. There's a group in Russia that's using the Ryuk tool set, and they're trying to attack a huge number of hospitals all at once. I don't think this story is over by a long shot. This group is the really interesting thing about this group. And for those who don't know the Ryuk history, people often talk about Ryuk as though they're a threat actor. Ryuk isn't a threat actor; it's a tool set. No. Yep. Right. And so this group that has adopted Ryuk here in the last month and a half is really interesting in the way they deploy it. If you think about traditional ransomware authors, right? They'll deploy some sort of bot, and then they'll spend 4, 5, 6 weeks reconning the organization, breaking into other things, deploying tools. These folks can go from initial infection to deployment of ransomware in as little as an hour. And that's like the fastest we've seen it be 24, 48, 72 hours, but you're still not talking about months, right? You're talking about like a day or two. And so there aren't very many hospitals in the world that have the kind of detection and response and intelligence programs to respond to this at speed. And so these folks, and I there's a special place in one of Dante's circles of hell for these folks to do this at this time, right? But one of the things that they know, especially with COVID on the uptick in a lot of these hospitals, this is the one time in history that no one has time to rebuild from backups. Right? If you're a hospital and your ICU is filling up, this isn't the time to be like, oh, let's go find those backups from 2 weeks ago and see if we can restore. I mean, restoring from backups is dicey at good times, let alone in the middle of a pandemic while your hospital shut down. And so these folks know very well that their customer in the health systems they're compromising, they have to pay. Right, and they have to pay whatever they're asked. Whatever they're asked. So, I mean, if you think about the speed with which these folks are working, 5, 6, 7 compromises in a week at a couple $1 million in ransom per, you start to very quickly imagine how much money these folks are going to make, and how bad it's going to be for the hospitals, but also how successful the attacker's being right now. It's really not a good time.
No. Mike, we're going to dive deeper into this, but before we do, I you and I are friends forever. I assume everyone watching this knows you too, but they may not.
That's true.
So let's do that. Mike Murray, security guy. Give him your background, Mike, and you, of course, recently started a new company. Let's talk about that in a minute, and then we're going to jump back into React. Absolutely.
So, as Alan and I have sort of intimated, I've been around for a while. I'm one of the old folks at this point. Started in security in the late 90s. Vuln research and pen testing was my area then. Have done everything since then, from large company. I was at GE and Liberty Mutual, small companies like NeoHapsys and Mad Security and the Hacker Academy, which is a company I founded with two companies I founded with a couple of friends, Aaron and Dean, who are
also friends of ours. Yep.
Friends of yours as well. I love those guys. And then was chief security officer at Lookout before starting Scope Security. And Scope started, actually, I'll give a little of the origin story of Scope because I think it's kind of interesting. When I was at GE, it started to become really obvious. Like, I would go out and meet with healthcare customers, and every time I talked to a healthcare customer, the story went, like, the meeting went exactly the same way. They spend the first 30 minutes yelling at me about GE's security, which, kind of deserved that part, right? Like, my role at GE was to do all the basically AppSec for everything across $20 billion of medical devices and services. I owned that security problem, but it would transition really often into that the security industry doesn't understand healthcare. And I mean, as well as anybody, we've traditionally built all of our stuff, everything that security industry is built, for financial services and for government agencies. And if anybody else can buy it, great, right? And you go to the security vendors, and the product managers will say, yeah, we support healthcare, which really means if the thing we built for Bank of America works at a healthcare organization, great, we can sell it to them too.
We can sell it to them, yeah.
Right. But it's not like it was built for a hospital. And dude, there's nothing that looks less like a bank environment than a hospital. Like, you can walk into any hospital in the nation, walk into the emergency room, plug your laptop into a live port on the wall, and be on the clinical network in 10 minutes. You can't do that at a bank branch. That's how you get shot, right? And so even just from that perspective, healthcare doesn't look like the traditional environment. And the way I explain it to people now is that healthcare is really an interesting place. So healthcare, what I like to explain to people is healthcare has 3 environments, and they're different than the 3 environments we're used to, right? So healthcare has the traditional IT environment, laptops and desktops, switches, routers, that kind of stuff, right? And the stuff that works in a bank kind of works on that. Endpoint is endpoint, DLP is DLP, firewalls are firewalls. Like, that part's pretty under control at most healthcare organizations. Then they have an environment of clinical technology, which looks a lot like OT. Right. And all these products have come out in the last 5 years to deal with OT, the Clarities and the Dragoses in the ICS space, Zingbox, Order, all of those folks. Right. And what's interesting to me about the healthcare version of that, it has all the same challenges, right? If you're talking about a medical device, it looks a lot like an ICS thing. It's usually maintained by a vendor that that doesn't know really very much about security. Sometimes the devices are regulated. You can't touch them. Patch cycles are long, if they ever patch at all, right? Taking them down to upgrade them, you're losing money. Like all of the things that you have in OT are true in healthcare. But the really interesting thing from where I sit is that in a lot of the traditional OT world, you have a split. Like if you're at Exxon, right? Exxon's headquarters is IT. Exxon's oil rig is OT. They're not mixed, right? No. Whereas in a healthcare, you have a laptop sitting in the same room on the same switch as a CT scanner.
The CAT scan.
Exactly, right? And so it's a blended IT-OT environment. And then you add on the third environment in healthcare, which is it's EHR, and it's not just storage anymore. That's the real trick. The EHR used to be just a big database, right, of all the patient records. Now the EHR is actually a fully featured control system that runs the hospital. In every room you are in, there's an EHR terminal where your doctor types in the notes to your call. So you're laying in a hospital bed. Doctor wants to prescribe something. They walk over to that terminal. They key in the prescription. The pharmacy gets a message in their terminal that says, put this drug in this, in this bag for this person. Then a nurse gets a notification at their workstation that they have to go pick up that bag and deliver it to the room, right? It's not just a database anymore. It literally controls every interaction. So you actually have three environments. Right. The IT security stuff works fine for the IT stuff. There's now some of those like almost IoT firewalls, right? They run from a central location if you've got the right switching infrastructure, but they're basically just like an IDS sitting on a span port on a switch. But they don't really connect to the IT stuff. And there's almost nobody who's doing anything for the EMR, right? There's some privacy analytics tools, but the most fun conversation to have with healthcare folks is, so here's my proposal. Doctor gets phished on their laptop. Doctor then logs into the EMR with a compromised laptop. How do you know what records they accessed? The answer is always, well, we have to catch that the laptop is compromised, then we have to figure out what happened on the laptop, and then we have to pick up the phone and call our privacy or compliance department and have them go read the logs. Mm-hmm. That's
sort of like contact tracing at the White House.
Exactly.
Exactly.
No, it's right. Yeah. It's totally right. And but it's this manual process, dude. We've had Sims and like SOAR technology and all this.
It's worse than manual. For years. It's non-existent, Mike. Let's face it.
Exactly.
No one's doing that.
So I got annoyed about this when I was at GE, and I've been ranting about this for probably 5 years. I started when I was at GE. Even after I left GE, anybody who had drinks with me when I was in a mood heard this rant about, hospitals, especially in the United States, hospitals have all your financial data. They have all your health data, which is really great to blackmail you with. And while you're in there, they can affect your life. And they've got the worst security across the whole industry. And I kept ranting about somebody should go solve this problem. And eventually some VC friends of mine and convinced me that maybe I should get off my rear end and go solve this problem. And so Scope Security was born. And literally the goal of the company is to build the product that we just talked about, build the product where you can go, oh, hey, this laptop got phished, and then they compromised this CT scanner, used it as a pivot point, scanned the whole network, and then they went and broke into something else. Nothing like that exists right now. You can put tons and tons of manual effort into your SIM deployment, but what healthcare organization has the number of people who can do that, right? And so it's just this nobody else is trying to solve this problem, at least at scale. And so we decided we would go solve this problem at scale, and somebody's got to do it. So why not us? But the activity of this week is really showing the need, right? Like when you see huge numbers of hospitals getting compromised, so I was talking to a hospital that had gone through ransomware earlier this year, and they said, yeah, we paid the ransom, and they said it was over, and now we keep seeing infections, and we don't know where they're coming from. I'm like, oh, this is exactly the problem.
Dealing with such honorable people.
Exactly.
And there's even it's funny. So I do this show every other week called CISO Talk. My friend Matt Newfield, who's CISO at Unisys, is co-host with me, right? And last week's show, I think it played earlier this week, Monday, was about healthcare and security. We missed this RIAC story by literally because we taped it the week before. We missed it by days. But one of the things that came out in that show was that basically the government has now said, I don't know if it's illegal or, not to pay the ransomware.
It is illegal.
Right?
It's effectively like weapons trafficking to sanctioned countries.
Yeah. And so what's a hospital to do, right? You're literally stuck between a rock and a hard place with people's lives on the line. And so this passes over the usual security conundrum into this shit got real. Yeah. Right. And what are we doing about it? And it's a bad situation. It is. It's a really bad situation. And we should note also, look, our audience is a lot of cyber folks, a lot of dev, digital transformation, cloud native. This RIAC ransomware, yes, it's lethal, and they're doing it. They've weaponized it better than it's ever been before. But it still gets in via phishing.
Yep.
Sort of your normal garden variety, negligent, or just not poor hygiene.
Yeah, always. It's either phishing or
with unhealth.
Like something that's hanging off the internet with common passwords, or some, you reuse the same password on your patient portal that you used on. I always say some golf website. Some doctors on some golf website, and they, the golf website gets popped, and they end up with the doctor's creds, and suddenly they use those same creds on the VPN for the hospital, and they work, right?
Yeah, go figure, right?
Yep.
So, as we sit here today, Mike, what's your advice?
Oh man. So I'll tell you the advice I've been giving everybody, and it's weird to be given this advice, but the thing that I notice across the healthcare industry especially is the number of healthcare organizations that have really strong threat intel or understand how to implement threat intel, right? So there's all this info that came out about the new Ryuk actors and, command and control server IP addresses and, file names and all these things that you can do to figure out if you're infected in that, hour to 72 hours before they deploy the ransomware and encrypt you, right? If you could figure out how to implement that in your current controls, you could at least have some amount of ability to stop them before it happens. The problem is, you have to be a pretty sophisticated security organization to implement third-party threat intel well,
and in that kind of time frame as well.
Exactly, right? And so, but this isn't the time to be shy about picking up the phone. If you don't have that program, and if you don't understand immediately from what I just said how to implement that, this is the time to pick up the phone and call somebody who does, because it's pretty much the only way you're going to stop this. Right. And by the time you are going to find it through any other means, you're going to find it because you got the ransom notification, not because you've detected it. And so this is the time to Scope doesn't sell threat intel. This is not a product. I'm not pitching. I'm just saying this is the time to be to pick up the phone and call me, and I will help. Right? Because this is the time to put all commercial things aside. This is the time for all hands on deck. This could be shutting down your hospital tomorrow. Today's the day to look for it, not tomorrow. Right? And that's I know that people are gonna say that that's Chicken Little and the sky is falling, but it's a lot of hospitals.
Typical security FUD, right?
You bet. Right. It's just not FUD this time.
Right. This is really, as you say, all hands on deck.
Yeah.
Hey, man, again, I hate these people doing this. This is such. So let me ask you a question. So now the FBI is involved, the government, Microsoft, major companies are involved. What's the time frame maybe to find out who these people are and shut this off?
I mean, people know who they are. There's pretty solid intel on who's behind this. The problem is, as well as anybody, chasing bad guys in countries that aren't friendly. like the Lazarus Group has operated for North Korea with impunity, because it's not like we're going to go bomb people, right? These folks, you said Eastern European. There's really strong attribution that the actors are sitting in Russia. That I saw. I think Nicole Perlroth from the New York Times wrote about it last night, and like, but what are we going to do? We're not going to send military troops into Russia. Maybe we can convince Putin to go get these guys, but what are the odds on that, right? And so
he has a friend here.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe he takes that phone call, but like when you're relying on that as your only way to go stop.
No, you're
like,
on
what are you
thin,
going to do?
Yeah, it's on thin ice, man.
Right.
You're hanging.
Right. So what are you?
I hear you.
Like,
terrible.
It's funny. So I don't know if you knew this. We launched a podcast. We did, much like you were talking about your episode earlier this week. We sat down and I did a 2 hour, like, it started out like I think it was like an hour and a half, and we ended up cutting it down. But conversation with my threat intel lead and my head of detection, because they're both like Ryuk experts, right? Mm-hmm. Like 2.5 weeks ago, we sat down and recorded this. It came out yesterday. Like, totally random, right? It's totally random and not intentional, but very lucky. But we got talking about exactly this challenge. Like, okay, so Microsoft goes out and does all this stuff to stop TrickBot, which, for those who don't know the relationship between TrickBot and Ryuk, TrickBot is usually the first thing that's installed, and then the attackers use that installation to control that one computer, find out other places, and then deploy Ryuk through the network where it encrypts things, right? And so Microsoft goes and shuts down TrickBot for a couple of days. Fantastic. These folks are now using a different version of TrickBot, which is newer and, got more bells and whistles. But it's just like a giant game of whack-a-mole. Okay, so we shut down some infrastructure for TrickBot. At all be surprised to start seeing actors using things like Terraform and using full DevOps capabilities, because, Microsoft goes and shuts down some of their infrastructure, and 10 minutes later they've got other servers somewhere else. Like, you got to think, I mean, you're a DevOps guy, you got to think these guys it's infrastructure as code at this point for the bad guys too, right?
Oh yeah, no, I'm sure it's portable. Trying to cut down their infrastructure is going to be a whack-a-mole game.
You bet.
You got to cut the head of the snake. I mean, that's the only way to do it.
But how do you do that?
Well,
right?
Honestly, I think you need nation state.
Yeah.
Of intervention here. This isn't, with all due respect, this isn't scope security.
Not a chance.
Or any of these security firms, FireEye or what have you. That's not what's happening. You need nation state intervention.
You bet.
And this is national emergency kind of stuff.
Our job is.
I don't want to end it on like gloom and doom though.
Yeah.
Your job's to help individual hospitals and healthcare providers with this.
Exactly. That was what I was going to say. It's like, look, there's two places you can fight this battle. At the very top, which that's beyond my pay grade, right? The cutting off the heads beyond my pay grade. The best we can do beyond that is go hospital to hospital and say, let's make it hard for these folks. Let's make it so they have to go somewhere else. Let's make them have to go after hotels or something other than hospitals, right? Like that's the job we've got to do. And as a nation and as a world, we have to start to realize that hospitals are the most critical infrastructure. I'm all for the work we've done with the power grid and all of those things. But if you shut down all the hospitals in a city, really bad things happen. And so it's our job to keep hospitals safe, which is why I started the company. But also, it's just a rant that I've had. Like, this is the environment that you should feel most secure, that you should feel most protected, not the environment that's the least that way. Right?
Absolutely. Agreed. Hey, Mike, we're way over time, actually. Scope Security, where can people get more information?
Scopesecurity.com. Check out our podcast. It's called In Scope, the Healthcare Cybersecurity podcast on all the podcast platforms, and especially that last episode about Ryuk, really actually quite good. But find me on Twitter, M. Murray. Find Scope Security on Twitter, Scope Security with an underscore, because there's some other company that had Scope Security from like 5 years ago.
Make sure,
hit us up on LinkedIn.
We will. Hey, Mike, now that this is on, man, you got to come on regularly. Okay?
Absolutely, man. Anytime.
We'll
this is a
talk
blast.
about it.
I love it.
All right. All
Cool.
right. Hey, Mike Murray, Scope Security. Look, if you're in the healthcare industry and you're nervous about this, Mike's a great resource. Reach out to him. This is Alan Schimmel for TechStrong TV. We're going to be right back with another guest.
ContainerJournal.com is the leading online destination for centralized computing-related content. ContainerJournal.com covers all aspects of software containers, from container management, data management for containers, container security, networking for containers, to the entire container ecosystem, Kubernetes, microservices, serverless, and more. ContainerJournal.com has the largest selection of container-related news, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.containerjournal.com to learn more. ContainerJournal.com is operated by MediaOps Inc., the team behind DevOps.com, Digital Anarchist, SecurityBoulevard.com, DevOps Connect, and DevOpsDozen.com.
Hey guys, welcome back. We now have a conversation between Alan and Phil Tees of Moogsoft. They're talking about how organizations can create system observability in the time it takes to make a cappuccino. I'm thirsty, so let's give it a listen.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us on another segment here on TechStrong TV. For this segment, I'm happy to have back on my friend Phil T of Moogsoft. Hey Phil, welcome. I love the seasonal background there.
Yeah, it's just
Thanks
you need these things in lockdown to remind you what time of the year it is.
Absolutely. Well, it's just better than looking out your window or whatever. It's funny. I read an article in Fast Company today about a company that just raised $36 million. And basically what they do, they allow you in Zoom to have sort of dynamic backgrounds with slides and resizing. What a great idea. It's kind of like what we do in post editing here, but you could do it now.
Yeah.
Kind of on the fly. And, of course, I went to sign up, and it's a closed beta, and you got to get on the waiting list, but I'll let you know. Anyway, speaking of closed betas, open betas, and general releases, Phil, you have some news to share with us?
Absolutely. So, today we're announcing, the full availability of our new self-service platform, the Moogsoft Observability Cloud. You can go to our website. All we need is an email address. You get an instance automatically, and a 14-day free trial. You can use it. You can send us any unlimited amount of events or metrics and get the full, experience of our products offering there. Bringing AI to observability. We talk about redefining observability for actionability with what we're offering. So it's super exciting. We see loads of signups, loads of activity. We think, the start of a new future for us all.
Absolutely. I mean, let's just think about the power of this, right? You want a full-featured enterprise observability program, but you don't want to spend, 6 figures up front. You don't want to take months to stand it up. You literally could just go in, put in your email. From the time you put in your email until you're starting to see numbers. Real value. How long you think, Phil?
Time it takes to make a cappuccino. You can literally go from logging into the instance to having all of your CloudWatch metrics, all of your CloudWatch alerts, correlating across stack, generating instance, all of that in minutes. We demo it. It literally takes less time than it takes me, and I'm not an experienced barista by any stretch of the imagination. To make a cappuccino with my cappuccino machine.
That's fantastic. That's just mind-boggling. And we should mention, it's not just the fact that it's kind of self-service on the cloud. It's the full-featured sort of all the bells and whistles.
That's right.
Moogsoft product in the cloud, and it is a 14-day free trial.
That's right.
As well of everything. What about like from a multiple user perspective?
Oh yeah, I mean you can have many users signed in during that trial as well, and actually for what it's worth, when it comes to it, and a customer decides to move to a paid tier, actually we don't charge for users. We kind of take the view that actually the value is generated by the amount of events and metrics that we correlate, so we charge on that basis. And we want it to be across as many people in your teams as you see fit. The one key thing I would say, Alan, that really I think sets what we do apart is the observability market's well understood. I mean, there are lots of people in there, lots of people providing solutions, but it tends to be about aggregation of data. So let me get all of your metrics and show you a graph or a dashboard, all your events, and give you ability to search through logs or whatever it might be. Our primary focus is about driving actionability from that data. So using the AI chops that we built up over the last 8 years with AI Ops, and adding that to the observability experience. Because at the end of the day, what drives outcomes and goodness for our SRE DevOps customers is availability. And that's all about being able to take action in a timely fashion and restore service, automate wherever possible, to guarantee that availability stat is a good one.
Excellent. And as you said, Phil, observability is kind of a well understood, and then there's no lack of people kind of hawking solutions in observability. Let's dig in a little bit about what the AI and actionability really, let's peel it back 2 layers for us.
So to give you a bit of an example on that, data is not in short supply from a telemetry perspective and observability. I mean, you're talking billions of metrics in any kind of meaningful sort of enterprise, and even down at the kind of the so-called 1 pizza team or 2 pizza team level of scale. It's still an avalanche of data. Same with events, same with logs, same with traces. And what do you do with that? I mean, as a human being, being able to, in a meaningful real-time basis, make sense of that, it's extraordinarily difficult to do. So our AI covers lots of different areas, whether it's taking a time series metric and learning the model, learning the periodicity, learning the auto thresholding, understanding when the value of a thing is something which people should take note of, so you don't have to do that by kind of staring at graphs. Or whether it's with events, spotting correlations and patterns across events from different sources, and then cross-correlating them with the metric anomalies that we've generated. It's all about using advanced algorithmics to do the work of the human eye and intuition in getting you at least to the first step in the diagnosis and remediation pipeline for an SRE DevOps. And we think that a large part of the wasted time that people end up in with incidents is in that kind of triage stage, which we're automating away and improving the quality of the data by the time it gets to the dashboards that we're putting in front of people.
Love it. Phil, of course, we've spoken a bit about kind of scalability, enterprise, all that. But I just, for people watching out here, not everyone is in a large enterprise. Who kind of is the target audience for the Moogsoft Cloud?
So we're addressing, it's not just Fortune 2000 at all. These are all SRE DevOps teams, from relatively small SME businesses all the way up. We have customers at the very largest, always have had customers at the very largest. But we also have customers at the very smallest now. I mean, there are people using Moogsoft's Observability Cloud today to manage a single application resident across, a handful of EC2 instances in Amazon or in GCP. And, that's, the problem is still the same. One of the defining things of our time in this industry is that complexity used to be something which was the preserve of scale, and the two have kind of become discorrelated. So you get complexity now, even with a single cloud application. Delivering hello world in the modern microservice architecture SaaS environment is actually an incredibly complicated thing in a way like it just wasn't the case 20 years ago when people were primarily delivering applications on premise or in owned infrastructure.
Yeah. I mean, when you think about it, that wasn't the intended it wasn't the intention to make just pure hello world more complicated. But I mean, I've seen this. I've seen it happen over the last 5-7 years. With the onset of microservices and containers, I go to conferences and I watch demos and I'm like, oh my God, it got a lot harder from just working in VI or something. I mean,
I still use it.
Well, yeah, you do. Okay, there you go. But yeah, it's a whole new world as the song goes. But so Phil, it's in GA right now, MoogSoft Cloud. Anyone could go sign up immediately. We had you on here. I'm going to guess it was 2 months ago, maybe more, and I think it was in beta at the time. What were the results of the beta? What were big lessons learned in the beta, you think?
Yeah, interesting question. I mean, obviously, this is kind of almost the law of large numbers. What we saw was some of the features which we were still cooking whilst the product was in beta. In particular, there's something which we refer to as bring your own API. And in essence, it's you can just throw us data in any old JSON format and we'll work it out, is really the kind of the headline of the feature. That was a critical need. And really, it wasn't until we had that it kind of unlocks the floodgates in terms of the volume and amount of different sources that people can, hook up to the system. We definitely learned quite a bit from our early users about UX and UI, and that was kind of the intent. We did a lot of not just in-person interviews, but also, of course, obviously digital. Heavy use of Pendo and similar tools to really understand, where people were getting stuck with getting things doing now. And the result is that the self-servability, if there's such a term, is a little bit contorted, of the platform is incredibly improved. We've seen, customers really sort of able to self-serve and self-enable with the product in a way which I've never seen before in the technology that MoogSoft has delivered. I mean, we see some of our competitors talk about 8 to 12 weeks to get value in the trial. I think that's our dear friends at Big Panda, which makes us, 24,492 times quicker, if I've got my arithmetic right, to show value with hardly any configuration, 300 times less configuration than it takes with that tool. I mean, it's just a lot easier. And of course, with it being a free trial, it being self-serve, you're not going to get bothered by a salesperson chasing you as soon as you log into the trial. We're looking to see you tell us when you want us to talk to you, as opposed to, welcome to our honeypot. We're now going to hand you with this, that, and the other. It's just the way in which the world works these days.
Great. Now, Phil, of course, there are going to be some people out here watching who say, oh, yeah, sure, it's a 14-day free trial. And then they own all my data. And for me to kind of, get off or move to a paid version as the 14-day trial ends, there's going to be some kind of crazy hoops to jump through. What does it look like after the 14, or as you come to the edge of the 14 days?
You click a button in the trial to request an upgrade to a paid tier. Our tiers start at under $1,000 a month, so it's really very, very cheap, and that's a full service platform with no restriction on the number of things that we're managing. We don't bother counting that anymore. It's a volume based tiering, and the click request to upgrade will today it will send you an order form that you DocuSign back and you're done. We will have within a few short weeks an e-commerce capability where you just swipe a credit card. But today it's click for request for an upgrade. We'll send you the appropriate order form. Deal's done in minutes, and customer is on their way.
Great. So, look, obviously we're living in COVID. It's been a crazy 2020, one that we'll all certainly remember. But this is big, right? This is another path or another step in the path to making observability better, more available, easier for everyone. When you look at it big picture like that, Phil, what do you see? Where do you see it now? Where do you see it going, kind of thing?
So, obviously there's two aspects to this, I would say. One is the continuing consumerization of enterprise tech. We are, I think, in the enterprise world, catching up with consumer in terms of making ourselves easier to do business with, making it more straightforward, making it self-serve, making the buying process and the being a customer experience, just much more like, Apple, and much less like, I'm trying to think of the DMV. If you have any experience of that in certainly the great state of California where I live, it can be tricky. So, we're learning that. We're trying to be easy to do business with. But I think the technological side of that, which is perhaps, where I'm, maybe more qualified to speak, I see a future where AI drives automation. For those of us who caught the announcements with GPT-3 at the beginning of this year and some of the incredible advances that are being made in AI, I think there's just so much of what requires human intervention today that can be automated away to free people up to worry about customer experience, the business side of the technology applications that they're delivering, and becoming a better version of themselves. I know a lot of people are worried about and maybe fret about, are the robots going to eat us, and does AI, create unemployment or whatever it might be? And I say that's nonsense. What it's going to do is there's a very famous bit of marketing from our friends over at Splunk from very early on, taking the SH out of IT. I think that's really what it's about. It's automate to make the job of SRE and DevOps a more enjoyable experience and a more effective experience.
Excellent. Phil, we're coming up on the end of the time. You know what I realized? We didn't even tell, I brought you right in as if everyone knew Phil T, everyone knew MoogSoft. We didn't give a URL or website, anything. Where can people sign up for this 14-day free trial?
So www.moogsoft.com/trial. And, there it is. And in fact, if you hit our website anywhere, you'll see the go to the trial button in the top right-hand side.
It's always there. Hey, Phil, I know this has been a tremendous amount of work for the whole team over there, and it sounds like you guys are really onto something. Come back, keep us posted on progress here. We're hoping, in the next month or two, we'll put 2020 behind us.
Yeah.
Let's look ahead at 2021.
Yeah, let's be optimistic. We're going to a better place, and it's darkest hour before the dawn, all the rest of it, but technology is here to save the world.
Absolutely. There's something about someone with that UK British accent saying it's the darkest before the dawn. It gives me Churchill visions. But anyway, Phil, thank you very much for being here with us. Good luck with MoogSoft. Check out this 14-day free trial of the new MoogSoft Cloud Observability. It's all the bells and whistles, nothing held back. It's a great, great way to get with the program. Phil, thank you so much.
Pleasure. Great to talk.
All right. Hey, this is Alan Schiff for TechStrong TV. We're going to be right back with our next guest.
Hey everybody, welcome back. We have a presentation that was done by Stephen Chin of JFrog at the recent DevOps Experience Virtual Summit. The conversation or the presentation is called Scaling DevOps to the Edge. Fascinating presentation. Please give this one a look, and if you are interested in other presentations during DevOps Experience, you can always go to DevOpsExperience.com and check out the entire day's events. But right now, here's Stephen Chin.
And hello, this is Stephen Chin. I'm going to be talking about how you can scale DevOps to the edge of your infrastructure, about how you can address the new coming IoT revolution, and how you could take your DevOps skills and experience and translate that to a whole set of new domain problems. And my day job is I run the developer relations group at JFrog and travel around the world doing conferences. Unfortunately, we're not traveling much. And when this whole pandemic hit beginning of this year, I don't know about you guys, but I envisioned that when the vaccine took over, or when the virus took over, and then we were all going to be quarantined, that somehow I would be a lot cooler and maybe, be going out and foraging for food with my trusty dog, and maybe a little bit more epic. But unfortunately, this isn't actually how the pandemic turned out for most of us, especially those in the technology industry. And instead, most days, this is what I look like. So I think that we're really fortunate that we're able to continue to do our jobs and proceed, do things which we like doing from home. Obviously, I think we've all upgraded our setups quite a bit. So besides the multiple monitors and the cameras and microphones and everything else, I think if you're a hacker, you definitely have a pretty good internet connection set up at home. And you probably have also been looking at maybe upgrading your home a bit as well, because of course we all want to have super awesome home automation and IoT setups. And this means even more devices. This means cameras in your rooms, door sensors, automatic locks, internet-enabled home security systems, and the list goes on. So I think that we're all adding in a whole bunch of new devices to our lives, and have been over the past decade. And I think this is all part of a much bigger trend which is going on. So there's a range, according if you listen to Gartner or Statista, but something between 20.4 and 31 billion devices are already online this year. So and then we're just continuing up the curve where we're going to double or triple this number in the next decade. So the huge opportunity here is with all these devices and all of the data which needs to be transferred and processed, and all the new updates which need to be deployed to these devices, somebody needs to support all this infrastructure. And it's going to be devices like some of these. It's going to be, cell phones, which obviously we all have, smart TVs, maybe even your refrigerator. And of course, you want to have a smart car, because obviously we're not driving a lot right now, but you want to have a stylish automotive when we actually get out back on the roads. So if you're watching this presentation, you don't actually need to take any notes. The presentation is going to be posted at jfrog.com/show-notes. And we also have a raffle going on, so you can win some AirPods. Actually, here's a trick for folks working from home. So often the best audio setup you can do on the cheap is just popping some AirPods in and hooking those up to your setup for Zoom meetings. It's a lot better than other headsets which you can use, and you can pair it with a nice microphone as well if you want to get really good audio quality. So AirPods plus a nice mic works out pretty good. So you can win that with the raffle, and you don't have to take any notes. All the slides and presentations are posted there. So let's focus for a sec on the automotive industry. Herbert Diess, the CEO of Volkswagen, said that they expect that the software is going to make up 90% of the automotive industry. And I think if you look at successful automotive manufacturers, a lot of this is about how they've done in addressing the new wave of electrified, autonomous, shared and connected devices. And this spans a whole bunch of different areas, but it's everything from autonomous driving, because of course we're going to reach a point where we can't drive our own cars. So of course we want a nice computer to drive our cars. It's a lot safer too. Fleet management. So if you're doing trucking or you're doing other sorts of businesses, this is a great way to expand your capacity and reduce liability. Battery technology, of course, underlies a lot of this, and the battery technology keeps getting better, even to the point where a lot of folks are using the same sort of battery systems that power vehicles to also serve as backup for their solar systems. Everything has to have sensors in it, so you have a lot of data being transferred around. Navigation, infotainment, you basically have the same expectations for car navigation as you do for your cell phone, for other devices which you carry around. And I think that the classic entertainment systems, which are kind of semi-outdated and just do GPS, are not enough anymore. You really want the same experience you get on your devices to work in your car, which Tesla's done a great job of. Automotive AI, communication systems, regulation tracking, a lot of the data which companies need to do tracking and tracing of shipping and logistics, IoT devices make possible. So you can do proper end-to-end tracking. If you've been getting any package deliveries from Amazon via UPS, FedEx, or their own shipping service, you see what a good job they do of knowing exactly where your package is at any time. And this reduces cost and improves the service for end users. Carbon footprint data on how you're offsetting and reducing carbon, safety data, and enabling shared vehicles, because that's kind of the next generation with us not driving our cars or possibly even owning a car. And it's expected that the ecosystem for connected vehicles by 2030 will be a $14 billion ecosystem. So not only is it all about software, which is good for us, all of us geeks, but it's also a huge growing industry. So, we may not have started out in the car industry, but a lot of us will end up there just by the size of the ecosystem. And the same is true for a lot of the IoT businesses. You're highly likely, as the business grows, to find job opportunities and kind of be moving in this direction. So it's important to be up on the trends. And then when the 146 million connected vehicles come, maybe you'll be helping out with one of these, or the 470 million vehicles globally. And the projection is that about 15% of the vehicles sold will be autonomous. In California, they just enacted some legislation around this. I think it was the year 2030, which they were targeting for doing a full conversion to electric. 30 to 35% of all vehicles will have some sort of electric drivetrain, and the shared vehicle increased by 40%. So with this coming revolution, what can we do to prepare as DevOps experts for this coming wave? And I think the biggest challenge which all of these connected devices introduce in automotive and in other industries is how you distribute the software. And a good way of looking at this is when you start at the source, when you're in your large production environments and your database of DevOps, you have huge pipes, you have a lot of capacity, and you can just stream data. And we don't really worry about this. We regularly develop with Docker images, which are in the hundreds of megabytes or gigabytes of data. And it's quite normal for us to just pass around large images because we have huge infrastructure. And then as you move closer and closer to the end deployment, to the devices at the end of the link, then you get to a point where, for various reasons, whether it's network latency or it's security issues, or you're kind of having large scale distribution, it turns to be a drip. So actually getting all of the updates and getting all the devices to that end state, you don't get the same huge distribution bandwidth, which you're getting upstream to get quick releases out. And a lot of things in our modern delivery system exacerbates this problem. So we're all doing agile processes. We're all doing some sort of rapid development. And it's expected that there's going to be over 520 million new app services by 2024. So with this huge set of applications, then you have a huge number of things which you need to deploy with an increasing level of frequency. So it's expected that, again, by 2025, greater than 60% of enterprises are going to deploy to production daily or faster. So this is great. We're all finally realizing the vision of continuous deployment. Obviously, if you are again, getting back to the smart car scenario, if you're have a critical issue or something needs to be patched or a security issue, the faster you can address it, the better, because the last thing you want is to have vehicle safety issues. And having a huge number of apps, but then having to deploy them on a high frequency increases. And this kind of explodes on the edge, because now you have to deploy all these devices to infrastructure, which is fairly remote from your systems. So it's expected by 2023, over 50% of new infrastructure is going to be deployed to the edge. And to kind of close this out, we have all of these different artifacts which need to be deployed. And it's expected that on these edge devices, we'll have by 2021, 7 million different edge locations, with 38 billion plus things to be updated, which we talked about is a huge number of devices, but again, a huge opportunity. And all of these distributed artifacts which we're deploying, these are consumed by a whole bunch of different folks in the overall pipeline of building software. So kind of the first set of folks who consume all of these artifacts are internal repositories of developer clients. So people who are developing infrastructure, who are writing the software, who are kind of doing the Docker images for local deployments for your quality testing. So in the software development process, you have teams of hundreds or thousands of folks who are pulling, updating, and moving around large sets of data. Then the next level is you're getting to external repositories where you have to share things, and it's expected that by the year 2023, over 60% of the Global 2000 will have third-party developer ecosystems that are generating 20% of the revenue. So again, this is an extension of all of the application development you're doing. And then all of this has to go through to machines which are part of your infrastructure in runtime environments, and also pushing to the edge. So you have a lot of infrastructure which then needs to push all this data out to get it ready for doing your edge deployments to the cloud. And there's a lot of points here where you essentially have huge distribution benchmark bottlenecks that are going to slow things down for your global distribution. So some of the bottlenecks which you're going to encounter, of course, are development teams who now have to support larger applications, have to do more development, have to deal with more security updates. Operations, who hopefully is doing DevOps and has a high level of automation. But again, we all know that deploying and managing Kubernetes is never easy. So there's a lot of things which need to be done to do a highly efficient, scalable, fully automated DevOps pipeline. Keeping a runtime environment up and running for the back end of servers, for all the communication happening between different instances. And finally, the end users who are going to be using this and deploying it on their devices, which, as we talked about, will numbers in the 20 to 40 billions. So the result of this is that you have a bunch of things in the last mile which can take a hit in terms of your speed of your deployment. So obviously the development productivity and the cycle time impact this. You have a huge risk as you try to increase velocity on your teams. When you're trying to distribute at scale, that great compounds the issue because now you have a global network of devices. And then you have to acquire and retain your customers, which if you don't have continual uptime, you're going to lose customers and lose acquisition of new business. So how do we address this problem? How do we solve the problem of distributing to the edge, maintaining high scale, and getting through some of these challenges with our production process. So I think a lot of the DevOps principles address this directly because it improves our productivity, our cycle time, dealing with operations. But there's a whole bunch of things we can do with technology to take care of that last mile. And here are some of the things which we're very focused on, which is one is distributing software via edge nodes so that you're not relying upon centralized infrastructure. This is basically a strategy you can do to make sure that you have highly scalable distribution. The next one is distributing software via content delivery network to offload a lot of the load on your servers. By taking advantage of a global CDN, you're greatly improving the scalability of your system. And the last one is you hit these large network spikes, which essentially occur because now we're transferring large images, as I mentioned, maybe Docker images, which could be up to a gigabyte or more of data. And having some way which you can avoid these bursts by using peer-to-peer download techniques, again, alleviates a lot of the problems at the edge and allows you to be more scalable. So let's go back to the automotive use case and come up with a quick example for an automotive cloud distribution. So here's one example of how you might architect a system to support this sort of scale. So you have your developers, you have your build systems, and those are all feeding new updates and new releases into some sort of central artifact management system like Artifactory. But that's not really enough because having an artifact system or a container registry can't really support the distribution directly to all these edge devices. It's not scalable. It's simply not going to be able to handle all of the simultaneous load, and especially pushing new releases or a lot of releases of new applications, it won't scale. So you need a distribution system which allows you to go out on a bunch of different channels, and you can do different edge deployments, whether it's edge in the cloud or it's edge hybrid, because you need to do it on a local network and local servers, or you're taking advantage of a content delivery system to push it out to a large number of devices. And between these systems, you also want the ability to do some sort of high bandwidth communication and exchange to get things to devices. So this works, but then on top of this, we can add a peer-to-peer topology to further expand the use case. And the idea here is now we're going to distribute all of this, but we're going to take advantage of essentially using BitTorrent protocol between different nodes, communicating data directly. And this allows us to scale up our instance and avoid a lot of those download bursts between different peers, which are distributing it to the client. So in this example, you can see that we have a Docker image we're trying to get out to a large number of clients. And rather than the data being communicated only from your main distribution or your main artifact repository to all of the nodes, we're taking advantage of a BitTorrent protocol to transfer the data between different peers. And this greatly alleviates your download bursts, and it gives you a constant response time. So this is an example of what the response time looks like without peer-to-peer and with peer-to-peer in terms of the number of concurrent downloads. And the problem here, as you can see, is if you have a large number of devices numbering in the hundreds, so this graph goes up to 251 concurrent downloads, but even the thousands or tens of thousands, you're going to get spotty and increasing response times if you don't have some system to alleviate these download bursts of large network traveling over the large data traveling over the network. And with the peer-to-peer system, this alleviates a lot of these problems, especially for edge nodes. So this is a quick example of a setup in Kubernetes with a bunch of different nodes talking to each other. It breaks down the responsibility for serving a package between Artifactory and the CDN. So you're using a content delivery network to transfer all the data to the nodes. The additional download request is served by Artifactory or your container registry. It's handling all the resolution of the right package versions, making sure everything's synced up so you're getting the right versions to your end users. And all of the authentication of private content happens upstream. Once it determines the right artifact, then you're downloading it and it redirects all the requests to the CDN, which gives you much higher bandwidth and global scale to get the server instance which is closest to the end user. Once the CDN download completes, then it can be configured per repository, allowing you to get it from different repositories which support this ability. And in this example, we're doing a Docker image of 85 gigabytes. So it's a large image. It's doing peer-to-peer per pod, so it's transferring data between different pods. And this allows you to scale your entire instance across a huge topology. So this supports the use case of being able to do huge DevOps deployments, and is supported by our overall platform, which includes CI/CD, security, artifact management, and then edges. So the bottom line here is that to support the coming IoT revolution, we need faster downloads. Faster downloads give you better developer productivity, faster time to production, and it gives you faster distribution, both internally and then to all of your edge devices. The second thing is that at scale, you're hitting a lot of concurrent download spikes, and you have to do wide-scaled worldwide distribution. So regardless of the number of clients and the size of the scale you need to do, if you have a scalable system which leverages multiple different distribution channels, has an array of servers, and then has some sort of peer-to-peer distribution among those servers, you can support a huge number of devices. And then by doing this, you're reducing the load on your systems, which allows you to improve the performance of your upstream systems, your container registry, and then to take advantage of that bandwidth to better support your upstream development and handle a higher frequency of deployment. So this is what we described here as a proven technology built on the BitTorrent protocol, allows you to deploy to the edge with devices built with the enterprise in mind and a fully integrated platform. A little bit more about this you can find at the show notes page, which I mentioned, which has all of the information on this presentation. We'll also put a link to the video when it's available. And some of my peers and I are working on a new upcoming book for O'Reilly called DevOps Tool for Java Developers, where we're kind of expanding the set of technologies and skill sets for folks who want to improve their DevOps skill set. And thank you guys very much for coming out to see the session and learn about how you can scale your IoT devices to the edge. Hopefully you learned a little bit here, which is applicable to your business. And I hope you enjoy the rest of the virtual DevOps experience that you guys are watching today. So thank you very much.
Everybody, happy Thursday. This is Charlene O'Hanlon, and I am here now with the Thursday edition of the headlines. First up on DevOps.com, we've got a Q&A with DevOps expert Kevin Baer about the impact of COVID-19 and digital transformation on teams. Kevin wears many hats as an author, Chief Scientific Officer at Praxis Flow, and the founder of the Information Technology Process Institute, in addition to his role as Global Senior Director in the Global Transformation Office at Red Hat. So he's had a lot of opportunities to speak with organizations and see firsthand how they're dealing with digital transformation during COVID-19. In a few words, Baer says teams are stressed and company culture isn't helping. Management does not always understand how to manage during times of change and adapt their ways of working within the new economy, he said. And that's putting extra pressure on teams as they work to digitally transform within the parameters that were set before the pandemic. In an environment in which the only constant is change, staying focused and coloring within the lines can be extremely difficult. It's up to leaders to, lead by enabling employees to realize their own value before those employees leave the company for one that does value and support them, even in the best of times. We also have an article that looks at open telemetry and its value in observability. Open Telemetry is a cloud-native computing foundation curated open source set of libraries, agents, and components that were designed to increase the visibility of services. And through Open Telemetry, organizations are able to better collect telemetric data for debugging and management. It's been around for a few years, and it is the result of the merging of Open Tracing and Open Census projects in 2019. Currently, Open Telemetry is still a sandbox project within the CNCF, but with all of the movement happening in the observability space, I wouldn't be surprised if we were to start hearing a lot more about it soon. We also have news of a report by Tidelift that shows an increase in adoption of open source software during COVID-19. The report is the result of a survey of more than 600 IT professionals and shows that overwhelmingly organizations are turning to open source software to save money and to increase the efficiency of application development and maintenance. In fact, 44% of respondents said their organizations are now more likely to use more open source, as 42% of organizations have cut their application development budgets this year. Now, the use of open source tends to go up when budgets go down, so the results are not really surprising. But as open source is maturing to the point where many organizations look to use open source pretty much anywhere they can, regardless of the economy, it's clear open source use is going to continue to rise. Now, I'm no soothsayer, but I wouldn't be surprised if even after the economic slump, the number of companies using open source and software will remain high. I guess we'll have to stay tuned on that one. All right, over on Container Journal, we have an article that discusses the 5 best practices for securing container images. The issue of container security is growing as more organizations turn to containers to streamline their application development efforts. They actually encourage security earlier in the application development lifecycle, but only if organizations follow basic best practices. This article looks at the 5 things organizations must do for ensuring container images, secure container images. If the container images aren't as secure as possible, the other tools available to secure cloud-native applications, such as access controls and networking policies, won't be enough to keep threat actors from doing damage. And that's never a good thing. On Security Boulevard, we take a look at the challenges that are associated with securing a remote workforce while enabling productivity. It's called the CISO's Dilemma, and it's based on a report of the same name by Heiselate and Teammate that looks at how changes over the last 8 or 9 months, honestly, who's counting anymore, have impacted how CISOs approach their job and ways in which they have adjusted their infrastructure, rules, and policies to balance security and productivity in an environment in which the workforce is now largely remote. Along the same lines, we have an article on mobile application security and some of the reasons why organizations just don't get it right. Mobile apps are now necessary tools for many who work remotely, since it's kind of difficult to schlep around a desktop wherever you go. So organizations increasingly are jumping on the mobile app bandwagon to gain more users and to stay relevant. But sometimes in their quest to get there, they skimp on security. And that's never a good thing for either the company or its customers, and something that inevitably will come back to bite them. This article outlines ways in which organizations can take a security-first approach to mobile application development. All right, that's all the headlines that I have for today's edition. Please check back on Monday when I will have a fresh new batch for you. Until then, enjoy your weekend and please stay safe.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everybody, welcome back to TechStrong TV. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, and I am here now with Keith Stewart, who is the Senior Vice President at vArmor. Keith, thanks so much for joining me today. Appreciate it.
I am super excited to be here.
Well, I am super excited to have you here because I'm really, because you're an awesome guy, but also because I really am interested in this topic that we are about to have a conversation regarding, and that is the importance of understanding relationships to better secure organizations. Talk to me about that. What, well, I guess maybe we should level set first, and you can tell me about vArmor and then tell me why this is an important concept for your company.
For sure. So vArmor is in the application relationship management space. And so relationships are kind of a big deal to us and really to everybody in IT, right? If you think about how we've classically managed IT, whether it's on the security side or the operations side, we tend to look at things like they're an event, right? And then we try and stitch together individual events. But the business doesn't really work that way, right? The business runs on applications, and applications are a collection of different things talking to each other. They are made up of their relationships. So if A is talking to B and B is talking to C, A and C have a relationship. There is a dependency there that using classical event-based models is very, very hard to see, very hard to understand that. And yet it is the source of much of the operational and cyber risk that everybody's got to deal with these days. So that's what we're trying to help people do, is tease apart A to B to C to D in order to help solve for operational and cyber risk.
Okay. All right. So when we're talking about relationships here, we're not necessarily talking about human relationships. We're talking about relationships between applications and other things on the network, so to speak.
Yes. And those can be network communications. Those can be people who are talking to those things. Those can be things like messages moving around in the environment through multiple different applications and systems.
So, it seems like an easy concept to grasp, but I imagine in reality, it's actually quite difficult to do.
Yeah, it's interesting because classically, if you were going to say, hey, how do I solve for this today? So I'm an incident responder, right? And I have something bad's happened. It's not good. And the number one question I'm being asked is, how far did they get? How big is the blast radius associated with incident? Same thing if I'm an operator and I've had a failed change. Something went wrong, it maps down. How far did it go? What's the blast radius of this incident? Very hard to do. You end up with people logging into one system, looking at some stuff, going and logging into another system, looking at more stuff, writing it down, logging into a third system, and you go painfully one to the other. And you have no choice because, of course, you have to understand the blast radius of an incident. What we do is allow you to sit on top of all the data that you've already got in your environment, whether it's cloud systems, endpoint agents, network, end user communications, and pull that together into a cohesive map. So you have a single place to look across all of these different diverse relationship types and across all these different diverse application environments to remove all of that complexity and allow you to understand how your applications work. And then once you understand that, make decisions on whether or not you want them to keep working that way. So you can shift into a policy-oriented way of looking at things and saying, I don't really think that A should in fact be talking to B and B should in fact be talking to C. Right? Maybe it's all right for my research team to be using research systems, but they really shouldn't be actively communicating with trading systems. That's crossing a wall there. I need to keep that kind of separations apart. And so by understanding these relationships, we can start to make those kinds of decisions as well.
That's really interesting. And in my mind, that really kind of ties security and networking together, the whole infrastructure, understanding that security is an integral part of, a networking infrastructure operations. It's all like one big hive, if you will, and you can't really segment or silo those and really have an effective security strategy and networking strategy. So is this something that you've seen organizations maybe clamor for a lot more these days because we are looking at kind of this integration, if you will, or this coming together of networking and security?
Yeah, well, and certainly as we now live in the post-COVID world, that's making some of the sort of underlying root challenges even harder. We tend to hear people prioritizing in a post-COVID world risk management exercises application resiliency or business resiliency, as so much of the engagement with the end customer has moved into the online world. And of course, remote worker enablement and frankly, remote worker risk management. There are banks who are used to having people sitting in branch offices and they're not there anymore. There are retailers who are used to interacting with their clients face to face. And of course, all of that is out the window at this point. It's all very much online. So understanding these sort of connected relationships allows you to pinpoint areas of vulnerability and areas of risk to align your resources. Because inevitably these days, everybody's also very cost conscious. So knowing where to assign resources, which are the risks that are most pronounced in the environment, become very powerful. I was on with one of our advisors a couple of weeks ago, and he was suggesting a way of looking at data by pulling together vulnerability management information along with your relationship map. And he said, here, do me a favor. Can you search for all the relationships between systems that have a CVE of 5 or above? And I said, sure. Look, I just typed that into the search, and here's your little map of everything with a CVE of 5 and above and all the relationships between them. He said, you know what you're looking at? And I said, I think I do, but when you ask it like that, I suspect I
yeah,
don't.
Or maybe, I don't know what.
And he said, you're looking at a remote exploit map of the environment. CVE of 5 or above means it's got a remotely exploitable vulnerability on it. You now have shown someone exactly how to attack the system. I said, oh, well, we do have strong authentication on who's allowed into the system. So that's good too, but it gives you the information that you need to sort of prioritize activity. And then you can understand where are my critical assets on that path. I can take action has a much stronger ROI than I'd ever be able to without this information.
Yeah, it's fascinating to me that all it really takes is some sort of visual representation of how vulnerable your network is, and you'll see things moving at lightning speed to take care of that. So that is a great tool for organizations. I can tell already. Does this also kind of introduce a level of automation to security and networking that perhaps is going to help organizations maybe remediate those vulnerabilities faster because they automatically know and maybe the system can actually automatically make the changes for them or do what is necessary to make it more secure?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the other really exciting people embracing more and more cloud architectures and more technologies on the endpoint side. We've got a breadth of capabilities, is you actually have an amazing set of remediation tooling at your disposal already. It's already deployed, it's in production, the cloud providers run it for you. What often is challenging for people though is to figure out what and how to harness those capabilities. What policies should I be putting in place? How do I gain value out of that and protect my assets? So certainly the other side of understanding relationships, as we said, is understanding which ones you want to see in place. And so we take the same approach that I was talking about before of understanding your relationships in an infrastructure agnostic way. We'll then take those policies and push them back down so that you can automatically use AWS security capabilities, Azure security capabilities, Kubernetes security capabilities, on-prem things with people like Tanium or CrowdStrike, in order to tie together all that different infrastructure, VMware's NSX platform, into a single cohesive policy view. And to your point about automation, what gets exciting on that front is you now have a single place that you can go to build policies, almost policy as a service. So one of our big banking clients has taken that system, plugged it up into their larger CI/CD pipeline, and they've now been able to, in a safe and secure way, delegate policy authority out to the individual dev teams and app owners. So they can say, hey, here's my retail banking app. It's allowed to access this client database, but it should never talk to the internet. And then they run policy checks to make sure that what the developer said was a good idea, right? If they said it should go to the internet, maybe that's a problem. And then all the way through that system, from self-describing the application, providing the visual that you described, building the policies as a service and getting those down into the underlying infrastructure, wherever it may be, all of that's automated into a single pipeline. It's pretty cool, pretty exciting.
That sounds pretty nifty. I I like that idea. I like that a lot. So do you think that, since we're now living in this brave new world of, work from home, and we're going to have these, I have a feeling we're going to have this kind of ping pong effect with, going to the office and working from home for extended periods of time. We're going back into the office. Does that change? I mean, from a security perspective and a networking perspective, I imagine that kind of changes the parameters, as people, basically extend the network perimeter beyond its traditional boundaries. How does your solution work with that, and does that have any effect on how or the way it goes about doing what it does best?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I was talking with a client yesterday about this. There's this debate about where's the perimeter in the new world, and I would argue that the perimeter lies around your assets. It's around the individual applications that you're trying to protect, because whether it's internal users or external users, there's so much diversity in where everybody's coming in and how they're accessing, what they're accessing, what the device is, the person is, that you need to sort of pull back and isolate individual applications and individual workloads within those applications. Now, that said, you still have to be responsible for your users and where they are. And again, in a post-COVID world where not everybody's sitting where you put them at their desk with a nice, good old-fashioned workstation in front of them, there's a lot more variability in that. So we've recently added the ability to track user relationships and how users are interacting with one another and interacting with those applications so that you can understand it. The interesting thing that we find about that is, while certainly there's a large pool of risk there that needs to be managed, and it's sort of the natural evolution of getting everybody in a distributed remote work environment as fast as we can. And all of a sudden people are like, wait a minute, what are they actually doing? And are they doing things that I want them to do? But we find that it's also quite an emotional thing, right? People are far more connected to what their employees are doing than whether or not, this app server is connected over a SSL connection to this other system. Have they got the right microservices architecture? It's all extremely important, but it's a little bit more kind of dry versus like, hey, look, we've got a sales team that is somehow managing to access this finance database in order to go and get proprietary information. We need to have a conversation right now. So the identity stuff we think is really, really exciting and opens up a whole bunch of new opportunities for people to improve their security in a simple and safe fashion.
And it also sounds like it's done in a way that really doesn't impact business operations in the process, since it's kind of in the background. So cool stuff. I'm digging this, Keith. Thank you so much for walking me through it. I'd love to see it in action one of these days, but I'd love to have you guys back on the show another time and talk a little bit more about identity and access and the ongoing war with cybersecurity in the COVID age or whatever.
Yeah, surely that would be super fun. I would greatly enjoy it.
All right, great. Well, we'll put a pin in that conversation and revisit it later on. So, but thanks so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
No problem at all.
All right. So guys, please stick around. We've got lots more TechStrong TV coming up, so stay tuned.
Disruption is occurring across every aspect of IT. Open source, cloud services, DevOps, and cloud-native software architectures are democratizing IT and radically transforming how business is done. The old ways of creating software and doing IT are being replaced with agile, flexible, faster, and cheaper methods, benefiting vendors and users alike. Accelerated Strategies Group is out to democratize access of industry expertise and knowledge. We use our expertise and experience to offer insightful, intelligent, useful information in a variety of formats relevant to the IT community, digital events, videos, reports, assessments, workshops, and implementation projects with tech vendors, IT organizations, and business leaders. We widely and openly share our work products, often for free. Analyst reports these days aren't worth more than a graph or chart that tells a story or illustrates a market trend. We work with developers, DevOps teams, cloud architects, security engineers, and transformation leaders most every day, creating and implementing transformational strategies and technologies. We're not just thinkers, we're also doers.
Hey everybody, happy Thursday. This is Charlene O'Hanlon, and I'm here with the Thursday edition of the webinars previews. As always, we have a number of great webinars coming up on Container Journal, Security Boulevard, and DevOps.com. Wanted to let you know about 3 that are happening soon so you can mark your calendar. The first webinar is called Federator.ai for optimizing resource management on OpenShift. This one is happening tomorrow, Friday, November 6th at 1 p.m. Eastern on DevOps.com, and it's sponsored by Red Hat Marketplace. This webinar will discuss the challenging problem of resource and cost management for applications running on OpenShift, and why enterprises often over-provision their cloud resources to ensure performance, but end up underutilizing their resources. There will be a demo of the Federator AI technology, yay, as well as customer use case. So this should be a really interesting webinar, especially if you've had that issue with over-provisioning and underutilizing your cloud resources. The second webinar is happening Tuesday, November 10th at 9 a.m. Eastern on DevOps.com. It's a webinar titled Improve the Reliability of Your Kubernetes Clusters, and it's sponsored by Gremlin. This webinar will discuss how organizations can improve the availability and reliability of Kubernetes clusters using chaos engineering, including how to use chaos engineering to safely inject failure into applications and nodes to detect weaknesses. We'll also take a look at a few chaos experiments that you can run in your Kubernetes and environments, and some specific recommendations to harden your infrastructure to improve reliability and keep applications running smoothly. Finally, the last one is the DevSecOps Showdown, how to bridge the gap between security and developers, sponsored by WhiteSource. Yeah, that's right. And this one is also happening Tuesday, November 10th at 1 p.m. Eastern on DevOps.com and Security Boulevard. It's running across both sites. This webinar focuses on that push-pull between developers and security personnel and what organizations can do to foster a stronger relationship between the two to foment DevSecOps. They'll take a look at some of the challenges of security and dev teams related to application development or application security, the contradicting views and the gaps between the teams around DevSecOps, and how to break the silos and advance toward DevSecOps maturity. Certainly, it's a webinar, one worth checking out if DevSecOps remains an issue in your organization. Guys at WhiteSource always do a really good job illustrating the issues around DevSecOps, and definitely I would recommend this webinar. Okay, that's all that I have for this edition of the webinars preview. I'll be back on Monday with another fresh batch for you. Until then, please have a great weekend and stay safe. Hey guys, welcome back. Right now we have a couple conversations with Mitch Ashley. The first one is with Eric Kedrowski of Sunray, and they have a nice conversation about security and the governance of identities and data across multiple clouds. Interesting stuff. After that, he has a conversation with Casey Zerkis of RSA Conference and Christy Westfall of the Union Bank. They're going to be talking with Mitch about an upcoming virtual series seminar called the Reducing Cloud Risk, What You Haven't Thought of Yet. Great conversation between the three of them. So please give both of these a listen.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everybody, welcome back to TechStrong TV. I am Charlene O'Hanlon, and I am here now with Jeff Brown, who is the CEO of a company called Open Systems. Hey Jeff, how you doing? Thanks for joining me today.
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, Charlene.
Awesome. Well, I know you guys just recently came out with a report that talked about the cities that are opening the fastest, post-pandemic or maybe still mid-pandemic, and those that maybe are not opening as quickly. But before we dive into that, I wonder if you can tell me just a little bit about your company and why you guys decided to do this research.
Sure. Well, Open Systems is, think of us as a SASE player. So we're a service provider, actually, full turnkey service provider in the SASE area, as well as a full security suite. So we're serving lots of remote users, more today than we did a few months ago, as a matter of fact. And we thought with all this interesting information, I think we're 279 cities, 53 countries. We should try to take a look and see if we could actually see how this correlated with the news that's out there. And so that's why we did the report.
So big picture, what did you guys find out?
It tracks with the news fairly well. We've seen the cities that have really done a good job of managing this. We're seeing less remote workers than before. Cities that didn't do such a good job are much more on the remote worker side, and the volume and amount of data coming through is exceptionally high. And then the cities that probably opened a little too fast are boomeranging back a little bit into the remote worker side.
So we've been hearing a lot about companies that have decided to let their employees work full-time remote, at least either for the next year or maybe into forever. Do you see that as kind of a trend that maybe is kind of waning a little bit, or do you think that's something that's going to be maybe picking up steam as we kind of see how the pandemic is, kind of moving forward and progressing?
Sure. I think it's really location dependent. What we're seeing is, cities that, interestingly enough, cities like Chicago and Frankfurt and a few others are almost back to pre-COVID. With what we're seeing there. Some other cities that, in the U.S., New York and Boston, San Francisco are 2 or 3 times what it was before COVID with remote workers. So it's really geographically dependent. What we are seeing is a huge amount of upstream data that we didn't see before. So, for instance, in Zurich, we had, I think, 200 gigabytes a day of upstream data that we tracked. And now that's 7.2 terabytes. So obviously Zoom and Teams and other things are really pushing a lot more data up there.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. So do you guys expect to see more organizations maybe that have brought their workforce has gone back into the office? Do you expect to see maybe them pulling them back into a remote work situation, maybe for things that have nothing to do with the pandemic or related to the pandemic, such as they maybe saw a greater uptick in productivity when they were working remotely and they get back into the office and maybe that productivity's dipped. So maybe they're kind of rethinking their strategies.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. What we've seen, actually internal to even Open Systems, we just ran a report and looked at the amount of usage of Slack and the video conferencing solutions we have, and theirs continue to rise, which is interesting. And so we're seeing the collaborative nature of this. People have actually, embraced it, and I think you'll see more and more companies using more of the remote workforce going forward, even as the pandemic wanes. I think this is here to stay.
Yeah. One of the things also that I've been hearing from some folks whose companies have kind of really embraced the remote work lifestyle, if you will, is they actually want to be in the office because there is that social aspect of just being around other human beings. It's not enough to do like what you and I are doing right now, talking, as awesome as this is, it would be so much better if we could just be face to face talking to each other in real life. So, I wonder if organizations are going to start maybe considering that very important element of being in an office that just can't be replicated via Zoom or any other conferencing system.
It's interesting. I actually just was talking to one of our employees today, and his comment was, I probably work more efficiently with my team today using we use Microsoft Teams and Slack and the others. I'm more focused and less distracted, and I think I'm less distracting. But I miss the social aspect. I miss the people I don't talk to every day. Mm-hmm. And I'd like to be back in the office to at least part of the time to be able to take advantage of meeting other teams and those types of things. So I think you're spot on there. We'll see more of, I think, people easing back into the office, maybe on a not a full-time basis, part-time basis around that.
Just to kind of, say, hey, I'm still alive. And
well, you miss all the parties, right?
Yeah, exactly. yeah. I kind of miss those birthday celebrations with all the cake and stuff. So, but along with that, though, I think it's super important because, just being able to communicate with people effectively. There's a barrier when you're talking to somebody via computer that you don't have, in the human realm, and. Just as an example, my kids obviously I have one in college and one still in elementary school, and they're both doing remote learning. They're both struggling to kind of get that social aspect. I mean, academically is, it's one thing, but, learning styles, and this would apply to the workforce as well. Learning styles are different between, there's different types of learners, and a lot of them are visual learners, and a lot of them are, kind of this holistic learner where they have to have all the senses powered, working at the same time. Mm-hmm. It seems to me that, for an organization to kind of get the best out of its workers, it's got to recognize the way that they work most effectively. And being able to offer the employees the option of going into the office or working part-time in the office and part-time at home or virtual, whatever, is going to make the most sense and get the most benefit out of those employees. So do you think that companies are really going to kind of take a harder look at kind of that I say at the softer aspect of, the employee base and work styles and productivity and things like that moving forward? Because, I kind of feel like in the past, it's all been kind of like productivity in one spot, or you're either like a person who's on the road all the time, or you're in the office all the time, and you don't really have a choice. But now that there is that choice, you think companies are going to, look at it?
I think, like I said, I think there's going to be a hybrid thing. Remote workforce is here to stay. I think there's no question in my mind that there'll be a lot more of it than there was pre-COVID. It's shown to be able to work. There are worries about that, security worries and all those kind of things. Instead of being able to secure the perimeter of the office, now we have to secure the individual, right, and their cloud accounts. And I saw a statistic the other day that cloud account hacking was up 600+% since COVID started. So there's clearly, work to be done there, and companies like ours and others are doing that to be able to secure the workforce. But I think you're right on with the social aspect of this. People miss that. People miss the contact, and I think, the water cooler or coffee break chat, and the other people you don't see. I see the same folks that I normally see in the office every day. I see them on Zoom, but I don't necessarily see the other people I ran into in the hallway. Right. So I think there's going to be a hybrid here that is going to end up being the norm.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think we're also going to see kind of a change in the way companies approach their workforce from, maybe trying to align work styles as much as they, when they're considering pulling together teams and, hiring new employees, things like that. They're really going to take a harder look at, whether somebody is comfortable working with, a hybrid workforce, or they need that, that in-person kind of experience to really, be the most productive. So I think this is really kind of a telling moment for workforce strategies in the future. So I'll be interested to see, maybe we'll have this conversation 6 months from now and see what you guys have seen since then.
Yeah, we're going to continue to track it, and as I said, I think it's 279 cities or something like that. So, and hundreds of thousands of workers. So we get a pretty good view of that, and it'll be interesting to see. As I said, there's some boomerang effects going on right now where people probably opened up a little too early and are having to pull back. But it'll be interesting to see how it shakes out over the course of this.
Mm-hmm. Well, Jeff, thanks for taking the time and walking me through this one. And seriously, let's circle back in about 6 months or so and see if the results have changed at all.
Love to.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks again. All right, everybody, please stick around. We've got lots more TechStrong TV coming up, so stay tuned.
DevOps.com is the #1 online destination for DevOps education and community building. DevOps.com covers all aspects of DevOps, including DevOps best practices and tools, DevOps culture, DevSecOps, business impact, continuous testing, continuous delivery, and more. DevOps.com has the largest collection of original DevOps content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.devops.com to learn more. DevOps.com, where the world meets DevOps.
This is Digital Anarchist.
I have the pleasure today of being joined by Eric Kudrowski, who is Director of Cloud Security Research and CISO at Sunray. Great to have you together. Great to be talking with you.
Hey, Mitch. Great to be here today.
We're talking about security. We're going to talk about identity, data, some governance things, breaches. But before we get into that, I'd love to have you just introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about you and a little bit about Sunray.
Sure. Well, a little bit about me. I've been in the security field for almost 20 years now, since coming out of engineering school. And I like to joke that, I was doing this before it was a cool thing, but, I've been doing it a long time. It's really a passion of mine. I've done things on the internal side, such as running CISO roles, and now at other companies doing things like external working with customers. So it's a fun challenge and an industry that I love being in. Who's Sunray Security? So we make a data and identity governance platform. So think about it in your public clouds. We look across all 3 of your public clouds and really help you identify the areas of risk with respect to identities, which really form the new perimeter, of our environments today. And looking at your data, making sure that your data is secure and that only the right resources can get access to that data. But furthermore, we help you, those things produce alerts, but what we really help you to do is get those alerts to the right people in efficient ways and enable that with workflows and automation. So it's not just one team getting buried in alerts. It's sort of fitting into the DevOps model and helping to get work done at the speed of the cloud, at the speed of business today.
Mm-hmm. Great. It's one thing to know, it's another to make sure that you address it, right? So
exactly.
You fit right into that space really well. Well, great. Let's talk about identity governance, data governance. Maybe I'm sure our audience has a probably working definition of those, but how would you define those 2 things?
Well, if we look at identity governance first, like I said, identities really form the perimeter of our security boundary in the cloud. I mean, in the classical data center sense, it usually was your network that did that. And a lot of times you could just, put a network choke point in place and put a bunch of gear there and watch the traffic flow through, but it really is not that way anymore. And we're, these large cloud deployments have, hundreds, if not thousands of different identities in your environment that can do all sorts of things. And you lay that on fact with the way that we work today in sort of the DevOps model. There's a lot more sort of fingers in the pie, if you will. So you really have to keep track of just, first of all, what they are, and then second of all, what they can do. And, it sounds like an easy problem to solve. Well, I know what this, Eric's a user and he's in this group and he can do these things. But, in the cloud, identities are much more than users. They could be serverless functions. They can be pieces of compute. They can be roles. And with that is that they can do other things. So like the classic example I give is, do you know your effective permission? So, Mitch is a user and he's in a group that has these permissions, and maybe Mitch is the junior co-op and he can't really do too much at all. but Mitch has permission to assume this role into another account. Well, maybe through that assumption, there's a policy on that role that allows Mitch to assume another role into another account. And now Mitch went from that junior co-op with no ability to do anything to a full admin. So you really need to map out the end-to-end permissions. And that's really the heart of the identity governance piece. And data governance is really the flip side of the coin. If identities are looking at, who can do what with what, or who can access my data and how can they do it, the data governance is the flip side. You look at it from the other perspective. You say, well, first of all, you have to say, well, where is my data? And again, that sounds like such an easy question to ask, but I know myself being a CISO, and you walk into a company, it's one of the first things you ask. Okay, it's like, we deal with lots of data. Where is it? And evidently, the story I always tell is someone pulls out an architecture diagram or gets up on a whiteboard and draws out the sunshine path. And you're like, well, that's great, but how do you know where it really is? And it's a more complex question to solve. And then, after that, as I like to say, not all data is created equal. A picture of me sitting by the lake, I wouldn't consider that sensitive data, but all of my personal healthcare information or all of my banking records, that's really sensitive. And as you know, in the security field, you're going to apply different controls to different things. So once you're able to find all your data, you're going to want to know, well, what is that data? You're going to want to classify it in a way that's meaningful. So what is your high value, or what we call your crown jewel data, versus stuff that you're probably not concerned about and not going to invest a lot of time in. But then where it all comes together is you want to start asking the questions of, well, what identities can access my data? And there's two pieces to that. It's like there's the potential, the risk. What can something do? Can Mitch do that? Well, yes, Mitch can do that. But then you ask yourself the other question, has Mitch done that? So there's the risk and there's the actualization, or as I like to say, the risk and the incident possibly. And then once you say, well, Mitch has done this, you really want to say, well, what did Mitch do with that? Like, you have to answer those questions as well. Did Mitch just access it and say, oh, geez, I shouldn't do this, and backed out? Or did Mitch just basically sink, terabytes of data to some other bucket somewhere and it's gone out the window? And again, that sounds like an easy thing to do, but it's really complex. And coming back to this whole cloud versus data center model, like, it's difficult. You can't just create a network choke point, throw a deep DLP in and watch things go around. You really got to have more creative ways in which you say fingerprint your data to know where it's moving. So you're saying
it is a dynamic environment, especially with the cloud, right? It can be, you talk about data proliferation, and it's not just a point in time. It's changing every day, maybe changing locations as much as every day, unbeknownst to you, or at least you want to know that. Yeah, exactly. And its use is more or less that. Well, there's of course, we always like to talk about breaches because they're in the news and, they're sort of the thing to talk about. But there's also, I think, a way to look at breaches. And, Capital One's a very famous one. Pfizer just happened. You were telling me about that. I hadn't heard about it this morning. There's lessons to be learned from all of those things. And oftentimes, multiple things happen, right? But you usually pin it down to some place where a point of governance either failed or wasn't acted upon or wasn't known, because that's what your risk management is about, right? That's what elevates that to you. Okay, this is a risk. How big of a risk? To your point, what's the value of the data? How's the identity being used? How could it be, escalation of permissions? So maybe talk about, Pfizer's a little bit that, or you talk about Capital One, as examples of where maybe governance might have helped.
Yeah, I mean, I think with all of these companies that you mentioned here, Pfizer and Capital One, but any other ones you hear, I mean, we've worked with some of these companies, in this role, and I've talked to other of these companies in other roles. And it's like, you're not talking about these companies that are understaffed and undereducated. You're talking about companies that are very well staffed, that have very big security budgets, that have teams of incredibly intelligent people. I've been on calls with some of these teams, and I'm just blown away by the skill and the intelligence. So, at least it's not that problem. What the problem is actually the complexity of the cloud, right? And so what you need to do, the first piece of governance you need to do, and we've been saying it forever in security, but strong security is based on strong operations. So you have to have that solid baseline, your basic posture management of your cloud or your multiple cloud environments. And that really sets that strong baseline for you to start identifying the major risks and really to sort of lock the front door, if you speak. But then above and beyond that, we get into some of these more advanced things like the identity governance and like the data governance. And, key to that is having the governance again and this is a topic that's been around security for, I'm sure if there's a security person that came down with a tablet, this was on it. And we talk about least privilege, and we've been talking about least privilege for 20 years plus. But really, it's so important these days when identities really form from the boundary of our security perimeter. We have to fully understand the end-to-end permissions of every one of our identities. And then we have to determine a way to get to least privilege. So when you understand the end-to-end permissions, you can say, this is what this does. But then you have to say, is this what this should do? And you have to, reconfigure your clouds to get there. But, as I like to say, getting to least privilege isn't the goal anymore. It's maintaining least privilege, right? And, the speed of the cloud is that, you could spend 2 months, and I've actually seen this happen. You can spend 2 months doing a least privilege exercise and spreadsheets and whiteboards and printouts and other things, and you get there and you claim you're at least privilege. Well, how do you know 2 minutes from that point that someone hasn't made a change that just completely undid that? So you really need to be, yeah, right. And you don't even know, I didn't even know that team could have the possibility to do that. How'd they do that? What happened? You don't know. So you have to be continuously monitoring for those changes on that side. So as I like to say, you want to get to, but more importantly, maintain least privilege. But then again, we talk about the governance on the data side. The big challenge, where is my data? I mean, again, that's a fundamental tenet of information security. What are my assets? Well, you need to identify your data. And, like a lot of customers we talk to, and not just big customers, most of them are working in one, if not two, if not three clouds. And some of them, when you say, well, how many clouds in, you're like, well, we're in one. And then you work with them for a bit and you're like, well, wait a minute, you're kind of actually in two, because you use an Office 365 and Azure AD over here and your Amazon over here. And they're like, oh yeah, that's right, I am. Or we're a G Suite customer and we're over here. So, it's really identifying all the places where your data is and then classifying it. So what is it? And then you put it together. The governance piece is that really the identity and data governance is, what can my identities do? What data can they access? What are they doing with it? And those sorts of things. And then getting, raising those alerts, not just to, the old model of a central cloud team or a central security team. It's like, throw it over the wall and bury them in alerts. That I don't think ever worked, and it certainly doesn't work today. So you need ways to really, make that work and get the problems to the teams that can fix the problems quickly. And a benefit is that you free up the resources of your security and your operations teams to act as consultants, not just, as you said, whack-a-mole people.
I'm really curious. You mentioned earlier the idea of good security starts with good operations. That's my characterization, what you said. How do you operationalize governance? How does that, it isn't the whack-a-mole process, or at least it shouldn't be. If it is, you're going to have a lot of problems. But how do you make that sort of institutionalize that as a process in the organization, make it part of the fabric of how you work?
I mean, so the beauty of what we work in today with technology is you can turn it into technology, right? A governance is a control on a piece of paper. If you look at NIST, if you look at ISO, if you look at any organization's internal homemade controls, it's literally, the control is this, the expectation is this, and the outcome is that. It's just words on paper. What you really need to do is you need to use technology to turn those words into actions, right? So you need a solution or solutions that can basically take that and say, okay, we're going to create a search or a query or a policy for this and actually technically check that. So that when, it fires, the auditor or the security person or the operations person has something tangible to do, right? They understand what the context is. They understand what that means for their environment, which is key, defining it technically, and then understanding what out of bounds looks like technically, and then bringing it to light. So that when governance is implemented that way, when something goes offside from a governance perspective, it's not the difference between an X and a check on an audit checkbox. It's an alert that tells you that Mitch should not have access to this data. Mitch now has access to this data. You need to go fix that. And it becomes very tangible. And then when it's tangible, then you're effectively enacting the governance in real life.
It seems also that part of that operationalization, is a complex word, is also there's the whole compliance and reporting and all the information that you generate out of doing these activities. And you certainly don't want to be, looking back in emails and assembling spreadsheets. And I mean, we've done it that way before, right? And we know, that doesn't scale very well. It certainly doesn't make for a very repetitive process. And I know that's an area of focus of yours with Sunry. and what your products do. I'd love to hear a little bit. And we don't do these interviews, these videos as a product commercial, but I would like to hear about how the approach that you took, how to kind of automate or operationalize that.
Yeah, I mean, fundamental to one of my beliefs is I'm a big fan of the DevOps model, right? You have these teams creating these stacks of things. And what's really nice about the DevOps model when you look at it from the security side is that, I talked about it earlier, is like you can get problems to the people that created the problem, right? So you can say to the team that's developing that application from end to end, okay, you failed these controls and we can show you all the technical ways in which you failed it. And so instead of burying your security team or burying your audit team or burying your cloud team with alerts that they have no context or no idea what to do, you get those alerts to those teams, right? And so you can configure your environment to make sure that if this application failed governance, that all the tickets go to that team and they're the ones responsible. And that's key, is really, making people responsible for fixing the problems. But I'm also I'm never a fan of the stick mentality of security or the team of no. I really fundamentally have always tried to preach, be the team of yes, be consultants. So what that means is you become a consultant as a security person, an operations person, and help that team fix that problem. And if you think about the way technologists work, I mean, they love getting their hands dirty, right? They love rolling up the sleeves and digging into the code or digging into the infrastructure. So when you're helping them fix the problem in a way that's normal and relatable to them, they'll remember that. So let's say that developer created that problem that created the offside, right? You help them fix it and you show them how to fix it technically. They're probably not going to do it again. And they're not going to see you as this team that's always holding us up. They're going to see you as, wow, if I had to figure that out on my own, that probably would have taken me 2 or 3 weeks. But, the security person had the knowledge and they helped me with my knowledge and we fixed it in a day. So you're going to get this sort of real hands-on the job training that really not just improves your security program, but really improves the speed at which you do secure development of your application or your product or whatever it is that you do. But another piece of that too is just sending tickets to another team doesn't always work either, right? It's still busy. Everybody's still busy. Everybody wants to move quickly. So leverage automation. If there's we call them bots, but if there's a script or a bot that can run that, every time this problem gets found, the bot just runs and cleans it up. Instead of a person having to get a ticket, read the ticket, say, yeah, I know what this one is, click the button, have something run, or actually run a script or do something. Use automation to do this for you. And start small, start at basic things, start at things that because I think a lot of companies are scared to do automation, and rightly so, because you don't want to break something massively. But I always say start small. Take something that if it breaks, you can recover from quickly. Work out the process, work out the kinks, and then get a little more adventurous and a little more adventurous. And over time, as you learn and your teams learn, you can start to do some pretty, significant things that in the past you would have never dreamed of doing with automation.
I really like the way you described it too. And yeah, my thought has been, so the evolution of security is, it's gone from a network thing to now it's a software and a system thing, of course. But that requires you have to know a little bit about how software is made and a little bit about software architecture. You don't have to be an expert. Not saying that you have to be an expert at that too, but I'm an advocate of go learn software architecture, cloud native, those kind of technologies, so that you have a good sort of fundamental understanding of that. But also the DevOps process, right? If you understand what you're talking about, if you want to know a little bit about that or enough about it, you can identify to say, while you're talking to that developer, by the way, is this something that we could automate and put into the CI process of the CI/CD? And so if it comes up again, I don't have to come bother you. They're like, oh yeah, as a matter of fact, I'll write it for you. Who knows how that happens? But if you know enough to identify where there's maybe opportunities to build that into other people's process, so again, you don't have to come back to them for those or similar kind of issues. All the better. Or maybe they identify the next one to fix before you ever get there, right?
Yeah. And I think there's a reciprocal there too, because I come from the operations world. I came up sort of to the CISO level in the security space from the SecOps space, from incident response and security operations, whatever. And, one of the things I say is, it's the ops learning the dev side. So how do your traditional operations people, your sysadmins, how do they learn the dev side to understand that world, the complexities, the needs, the requirements, and then how to do it? But I also think there's a piece that gets less talked about, but something I'm really passionate about is the dev people learn about the operations side. I mean, operations didn't go away with the cloud. We may not call them sysadmins anymore. It's a cloud ops or cloud admin or DevOps or whatever you call them. But I think that's a really important piece of learning as well. So there's this reciprocal training that goes on. The operations people learn to be, better devs, and the devs learn operations better, so they fully understand each other. Where I think at points in time they're always conflicting. It's like, those darn developers, they don't know what they're doing. Oh, those darn sysadmins are always blocking us. And then from a security perspective, the onus is on the security team. They got to understand all of it. But they can also help those other two teams understand security, so that when they come together, the applications person understands, well, this is why I need to write in those extra checks, because now I understand security, what can happen, as instead of a theoretical, I understand what can happen. And I think that when you do that, then as a business, so when you take it out of the dev and the ops side, the business itself gets to learn. They get to learn that security isn't always the team of no, and they're not the 11th hour drag. You just have to incorporate them in the right ways. And now you can basically develop your product or your code or whatever it is that you do as quickly as the reason why you went to the cloud and are adopting these methodologies, but in really secure ways. And I think that once businesses start to see that, once the business leaders start to see that, even as far on as the sales teams, like as far away from the technology as the sales teams, start to see how this speeds up deals because your reports are clean and your product doesn't have problems, that they really begin to understand. And I think the core of it all is that learning circle that happens in the dev and the ops and the sec bit.
Get that product out the door quicker, right?
Yeah.
Are there, I know there's lots of best practices, of course, in security. Are there a couple of best practices that you think are the next things, or you wish that we would start to adopt to make governance easier for us, or this interaction between ops and SecOps and developers? What are your thoughts about that?
I think my thoughts are, we just have to, the cloud is still relatively new, right? And we can move to the cloud quickly. Like, I was at a company once where we moved, a huge application to the cloud very quickly. It doesn't mean that the people that were responsible for securing and administering it learned everything they needed to know about the cloud as quickly. So I think we have to be really conscious of that and put the focus on that. It really is fundamental that your teams, learn this stuff and understand the cloud, and really think about the new paradigm shifts. We've talked about identity governance, right? What does that mean? What does it mean to get to least privilege? What does that look like in my environment? And how do I stay there? And then the data question, right? Like, you have to be thinking about that at all times. Where is my data? What is my data? Who can or who is accessing it? And where is it going? And, I think that those things have to be sort of the ethos of from bottom to top and top to bottom. If your CISO and your executives are asking those questions in your executive meetings, then you're doing a good thing, because it means the business understands the importance of those questions. And it's not just a security guy in the security tower sort of world, right?
Pointing down at other people or vice versa, right?
Yeah.
Well, this has been super helpful. I've really enjoyed talking with you about it, and some I think some pretty pragmatic advice too. So you really had a good conversation. Enjoy talking with you, Eric.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Mitch.
You bet. It's been my pleasure having Eric Kudrowski, who is Director of Cloud Security Research and CISO with Sunry.
CISO Talk, to hear how real-world CISOs are dealing with today's real-world issues. From enabling secure remote workers to accelerating secure cloud adoption, defending against a pandemic of security attacks and beyond, CISO Talk covers the cyber topics you want to learn about. With your hosts, Unisys CISO Matt Newfield and MediaOps CEO Alan Schimmel, featuring a revolving panel of CISO cyber experts. This is where CISOs talk. Join us on digitalanarchist.com and TechStrong TV.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hi, I'm very privileged to have two excellent folks joining me today. We're going to be talking about an event that RSA Conferences is putting on. First, I'd like to introduce Casey Zerkis, who is Content Strategy with RSA Conferences. And Casey, it's great to have you on. Please introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about you and what you do at RSA Conference.
Thanks, Mitch. It's such a pleasure to be here. And I'm thrilled to be talking about this. Is the first of our virtual series offerings, our RSAC 365 virtual seminars. And moving forward, we'll be having one of these per quarter, but this is launching our seminar series. And we're super excited to be focusing on reducing cloud risk, what you haven't thought of yet, on November 17th.
Excellent. And of course, we love RSA events. I think I've been going to RSA since back in the mid 2000s and in the US anyway. Great to see some virtual activities happening. You said this is a series that you're planning on offering?
Yes. So back in when we launched the call for speakers for the US event, we also announced our RSAC 365 Cybersecurity Learning Program. And that entails a lot of different offerings. We have monthly webcasts and podcasts and blogs. And we also have the virtual seminars, which are half-day events that we'll do quarterly. We have another full-day summit coming up in January where we'll have multiple tracks and interactive opportunities. So we're really off and running with our virtual offerings and super excited to be engaging with our community.
Fantastic. Lots of great content. Looking forward to this as well as the other events. And we have joining us here is Christy Westfall, who is VP of the Incident Response Team for Cloud at Union Bank. Welcome, Christy.
Thanks, Mitch. Appreciate it. Glad to be here.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about yourself. Union Bank is obviously a bank, but tell us a little bit about Union Bank and sort of the markets you serve, or a little bit about the company.
Yeah, so again, I manage the incident response team for Union Bank here in the US. Our parent company is actually MUFG Bank out of Tokyo. So we have an opportunity to do a diverse amount of incident response with our global affiliates, as well as here within the US, where we have on-prem and cloud incident response. So a lot of opportunity there.
I've been had a lot of great practical learnings and experience, I imagine, too. Now, you're program committee chair, right? Is it for this event or for the series?
For this event. Yeah, and I've had, I talked previously, actually earlier this year at the RSA conference on cloud incident response. I've had quite a journey to get to this point, in that when Union Bank started out trying to basically build out our infrastructure in the cloud, we as security folks kind of had to learn a new language, right? And it was really interesting, because every time I went to the AWS training sites or any of the AWS education series, you'd look up incident response specifically, and they would talk about things, not that we would normally look at for incident response, like identity and access management. Well, that's a whole other team. Why are you asking me for that? But that's actually pretty critical to being able to respond to an incident, because IAM drives everything in the cloud. So that was quite the journey, and then getting through all that and learning all that. So I learned a lot, and I love to share lessons learned. That's one of the things I do. So whenever I get a chance, I do that as well. And that's kind of what also drove the content for this particular event. Is yes, we understand traditional incident response. We understand traditional infrastructure support. But it's always the little things and the things we don't think about that get us. So that's how we pick the various sessions that we're going to be hosting that day. So for example, we're trying to also make this very interactive, because it will be online. And listening to someone just talk for a long period of time online is not the most exciting thing. So we're trying to make this as interactive as possible. So I'm doing a birds of a feather session on tabletop exercises and how to apply threat modeling and these tabletops to identifying risks. I find, as a part of our incident response program, we do just a whole bunch of different exercises all year long. And we uncover risks that, when you get all the right players around a table or a virtual table to talk about, what are we really worried about, and what are our gaps? It's amazing what you can understand, what you can find out. So the goal of my Birds of a Feather is to kind of drive that conversation, how I've had some success doing that, but I also want to hear from participants. What have you had success with? How are you implementing these tabletops? And so that's kind of a little bit about what I'm talking about.
I think that interactivity certainly makes it more engaging, right, over a virtual event. And especially a topic like this, I'd listen to somebody else talk about it alone. If you bring it to a group conversation, certainly you learn from a lot of people at the same time. I'm really interested, Casey, in your perspective too, as someone who's, leading sort of the move into the virtual environment for our RSA conference. We all know the physical conferences really well from across the globe. What's your thoughts and experience going into an event like this, of both how to work with Christy and designing the topic and how to bring that to the audience, and maybe what you've learned so far that's worked really well for people that have been both engaging as an expert, but also as a participant in the audience?
It's really interesting, Mitch, because we, when we decided that we would embark upon these half-day seminars, traditionally the seminars that are offered at conference are indeed half days. They're 4 hours of content that is designed with sort of an arc. Everything is interconnected and it's intended to be consumed all together. And so we had that in our minds as how we wanted the seminar to unfold. And we looked at, who are some really key players in the industry that have been able to share their experiences and shared it well. And that's where, we looked at Christy's experience with, as she mentioned, RSA Conference 2019. And, she did do a great learning lab and got rave reviews. And so we went to her and said, if you were going to attend a seminar on cloud security, what are the things that you would want to be talking about? Like, what are the topics that are most troubling to you, the questions that you have, the things that you're struggling with? And that's where the whole seminar curriculum, if you will, started to come to fruition. And she just, was very thorough and rattled off a lot. I think it was like 13 different topics at first. And we were like, okay, how are we going to cover all of this? And it was really Christy's idea to bring in that interactive element, which traditionally we wouldn't really have in a physical seminar. But because we're offering it virtually, she felt it was really important. And so we decided, okay, maybe we could take some of these topics and have them delivered as traditional sessions. And then those other topics where, interactive is maybe, as you pointed out, a little more critical, we can offer them as birds of a feather. And, we sort of had to explore how technology can lend to that opportunity, or certainly we've, had to deal with obstacles of technology as we've, embarked on this. But we're super excited with the way that the seminar has come together, and it's 3.5 hours of great content with 30-minute sessions that are lining up with, we've got the traditional sessions with people from Cisco and IBM and, some big players. And then the birds of a feather, we have Christy and Brian Riley, I believe his name is this going to be edited?
We can help you with that.
Thank you. Brian Riley from Liberty Mutual Insurance.
There you go.
So, we've got some really strong players that are going to be interacting with attendees and able to answer questions live. So, and then it will all come together in a culminating panel at the end where the four traditional session speakers will join Christy and me for a panel discussion. So
excellent. Really tie it all together.
Yeah. We've really, it's been fun to see it all come together.
Well, it's great to hear, Christy, the interaction that you all have had already in designing the topics and coming up with this birds of a feather. What are some of the things that you hope to talk about or cover and interact with the participants on? What are some of the topics?
So it's interesting. Again, we're trying to dive into topics you don't normally think about, like identity and access management. People don't consider that. Again, it's identity and access management. That's its own service.
We've been doing that a long time, right? That should
be
right. Not necessarily in the cloud, right?
But if you do it wrong, you have a larger impact when it gets exploited by the bad guys. And we've seen use cases of that again and again. Other aspects, privacy, right? If you decide to put one of your applications outside the US and host it in one of the regions outside the US, what kind of data can you store there? And what kind of implications are around that? So those are just a few of the ones. We're looking at monitoring as well. How do you make sure that you're monitoring the right things and at the right times and reacting at the right things? Configuration management is also a good one because we're trying to understand how do I, again, know everything I have in my entire inventory of cloud applications when you start to dig in and you've got third-party services and microservices and other tools and your homegrown tools and the service provider tools and knowing, are all those up to date? What do they give access to? What don't they give access to? All those types of things. So we're going to have a lot to explore in 3.5 hours, and I'm really excited to do it.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Just even the topic of incident response, which you obviously focus on in your work. I would imagine there's a lot of learnings that you had of just yourself going to the cloud and through Union Bank's evolution. Not to be specific about the details of that, but certainly the learnings that you've had, as well as all the experience that you bring to it. Sometimes you validate these things still hold true, and we bring those with us. But there, as you mentioned, there's some things that are very different about the cloud. In particular, the impact could be much, much greater if an identity is stolen or abducted in some way. What are some of those other learnings that you're hoping to share?
Well, it's a different. One of the things I learned really early on is that you have to understand. So it's a different language, right? So everything we have on premises, firewalls, DNS, all that kind of normal to us IT components that we needed to understand in incident response are named completely different services in a lot of the cloud service provider offerings. So, Route 53 in AWS is DNS and normal on-prem. So not only do we have to kind of understand the shared responsibility model, who owns what and who can respond to what, and who can help us respond to what when something goes wrong. But how do we know where to go find the data that we need? Just alone trying to, they have for different logging services and different logging formats and different, it's almost like you have to do some sort of Rosetta Stone to be able to translate what you used to know into what is now. And that can really impact an incident responder, because one thing I always say about incident response is know your environment, know where the things can go wrong. And this is why we explore these kinds of things in tabletop. If I know where something, might not be as strong, I'm definitely going to put that in a scenario and talk about that with stakeholders and say, if this thing happens, what are the implications when it's broken? And when you actually have to talk about those things out loud, it gets a little bit scarier and people want to take more action. So I don't try to instill fear in people. That I think that's the wrong approach. But when they realize it themselves, that's when the light bulb goes off, and that's a benefit that we can take forward and offer better protection that way.
Sometimes it's just connecting the dots, right? Of as you say, the enormity of it or the impact of it. I'm curious. Casey, and thinking about our current environment, so many organizations have accelerated their move to the cloud. We have some data in our research at my analyst company that validates that. Have accelerated digital transformation projects, all kinds of activities have certainly supported contactless delivery for some types of businesses, certainly remote work from home, that kind of thing. As you've put content together, working with Christy, have you seen a shift to newer topics or greater emphasis on certain topics in just what's happened in the last 6 to 9 months with COVID and all the impact to our organizations?
It's interesting because, as we were planning this and putting this event together, we were also reading through the submissions for RSA Conference 2021. And so I felt very validated in the curriculum we designed for this seminar, that these are submissions that are coming through that we're seeing for 2021 as well, like just these same ideas about staffing problems and access control and identity. And, we definitely have also gotten a lot of submissions for our RSAC 2021 and our 365 program about, resiliency, which is, of course, our theme for 2021, but also, just addressing that issue of COVID and, are you prepared for a cyber pandemic? And so I think that it's hard for that topic not to be front of mind for everyone. We're still living it. And so we would like to think that, by the time May 2021 comes around, that no, we don't need to talk about securing the remote workforce anymore. But, the reality is that we're still living in this situation, and these are still topics that people are challenged with, and they're working through, they may have rushed to the cloud and made some rash decisions along the way. And now they're taking the time to look and say, okay, what did we do? Why did we do it? And how are we going to fix the implications of those choices that we made? So, yeah, I think we're spot on with launching this program with reducing cloud risk.
It's nice to have that validation too.
Yeah.
You think this is content that's going to be meaningful and useful to folks. I'm curious too, Christy, from your experience, as Casey mentioned, the rush to the cloud is something that many folks have experienced. Sometimes it's just rushing to make a decision on what online meeting system we're going to use, what collaboration tool. We're in an evaluation process that was taking months, maybe a year or more to pick a tool. And suddenly now in a week, we're going to choose, whatever it is, Slack or Team or some other environment to collaborate. Now you can step back with a month or two, post those decisions and start to think about, now, what do we need to go back and relook at or readdress? Have you experienced that kind of a process as you've lived through this rapid execution, living in the COVID era?
Well, and that's kind of funny. I've experienced that not at where I am now. I have experienced it previously where I've got to have this now to solve this one thing. We're definitely going to do that. And then you pay for it later. One approach that I think has worked really well, even though it has taken probably more time than some folks would like, is that we painstakingly made sure that controls were in place before we went to each kind of what we call milestone in the project. So, certain controls had to be in place for certain levels of risk, and we had a partnership with our audit partners to make sure they were in place, and they, again, we're doing what we say we're doing. So I think that approach, it can be painful, but I think it's also important that you do that up front, because it's going to save us a lot of time going in the back end when we're actually in production, because we already have all these things in place, and hopefully we've thought of a lot of these risks. I think it's kind of an evolution, and it's an ongoing process. So I'm still going to be holding tabletops, and we're still going to be talking about things, and we're going to still be trying to identify where those holes are, and we're going to be trying to fix those holes. And nothing's ever perfect because there's so many components to it. But that's the key is ongoing improvement, right? You just don't, it's like anything else. You don't just put the technology in place, set it, forget it, and go, oh, it's just fine. I'm going to ignore it now. You always are having to constantly check to make sure, well, what changed? Did, again, a third-party service change? And I need to make sure that it works just the same as it did before, or maybe slightly different, and it could be exposing us to something we don't want.
Mm-hmm. I'm curious too. One of the challenges, and I've been working in security for about 25 years or so. Security is such a broad field in cybersecurity. It's, to put a box around is pretty tough because there's so many different topics. I'm really curious, Casey, as you think about this, you can always go with what's hot. We want to talk about security for AI or security for whatever is on the top 5 list. Not the best approach, right? You want to really speak to what people are wrestling with, information that they can find useful. And as you're thinking about your panel at the end, talking with Christy and other presenters, folks that are helping you with the content of this event, how do you bring that together? How do you bring all those disciplines together and ask questions that everybody can add their perspective to? Is that a challenge, or is that just challenge for people like me, but easy for you as a content strategist?
Christy certainly made it easy by offering up the suggested topic of business continuity, which I think is a great way to tie it all together. But to your point, when we pose that to the speakers who are talking about configuration and privacy and enhancing visibility, and you're in the cloud, now what? There was a little bit of like, oh, well, what does that have to do with business continuity? Because you're right, we are so siloed in what we do, despite the fact that it's a very vast and broad industry, right? And so we're really looking forward to that conversation and engaging with each of those 4 speakers to talk about the way that your topic is critical to the business and business continuity and resiliency. And so we have a prep call with the speakers to make sure that we're all on the same page. And I think it's going to be a really thorough and fantastic discussion. So
sounds like it. I'm planning on tuning in. You told me I'll be there. Where can people find out information to register, find out about this as well as kind of other upcoming RSA conference events?
Yeah, rsaconference.com. And the virtual series is listed under our events tab. And I'll also put in a plug for our RSAC 365 cybersecurity year-round learning program, where we're open ongoing submissions. So anyone who has a topic they'd like to share, we'd love to hear from them.
It's a great thing having a series or rolling events, series events is there's always room for another topic that's coming that we can, slot into the programming. Just sort of parting thought, Christy, if you were someone who wasn't not presenting at this event, but maybe listening to this or watching this video, what are some of the questions you might be thinking about that you'd love to have answered by coming to this online virtual event?
I truly hope with what we've got packaged up is that we can start making them think. It's in the title. What haven't I thought of yet? Right? I want to answer that question for them and beyond. Right? I don't want them to stop at what we presented, because I'm sure there's other topics we could have covered that would also be applicable to their individual organization. And I hope they can go back and start having those conversations and looking with get that spyglass out a little closer and start looking for those holes that you might not have been aware of before.
Great thought. I don't know, Casey, anything you want to add from your perspective?
I'm just excited. The first for anything is always super exciting. And it's been such a it has seemed so easy to pull this together, and everyone has just been so agreeable to coming together and supporting and sharing their wisdom. And I just love that we're able to provide this ongoing education to our audience. And I'm so grateful to our speakers who are always more than willing to participate. So I'm just excited.
Yeah, there's a great agenda, and I hope folks will check it out. Everything from, how do you do tabletops? What are sort of ways to staff security for cloud security, cloud platform problems. So, just touching on a few of the things in addition to what Christy's talking. So it's been great talking with you both. It's so cool to talk to both of you who have been designing this and the series and putting this together with both what's going to be talked about, but why you're going to be talking about it and the thinking behind it that's brought you to this place. I think that hopefully will give folks a little even more insight, more incentive to come check it out, be part of it. Thanks for being with us today.
Thanks for having us.
Great. Be sure and check it out. We hope that you'll participate in this and future events with RSA Conference.
All right, that wraps up today's episode of TechStrong TV. Please join us again on Monday. Alan will be back as host of the show. And until then, I hope everybody has a great weekend. And please, whatever you do, stay safe.